phone system.
Good morning, everybody,
Thank you.
and welcome to the January 12, 2020 meeting of the Northport Village Corporation Board of Overseers. I'm John Spritz, the president. We have a lot of items to deal with today, so we'll move efficiently, I'm sure, through them. We have here today all 6 of our overseers attending, except Michael Terrell, who is on the telephone. So you have all 7 in attendance, which is great. And the first item is a motion to approve the minutes of the November 17th meeting of this board. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, thank you. Our next item, and we're going to separate out the seawall project update to land in the infrastructure report at the top of the committee reports. Other than the seawall project, are there attendees of the meeting who have any issues or questions they'd like to raise? Please step up, identify yourself.
Oh, okay. Sid Block.
Mhm.
And I have a statement that I'd like to make and to enter into the minutes. And this is related to the meeting last Wednesday at the Belfast Planning Board. On January the 8th, the public was finally able to present its case against Nordic Aqua Farms to the Belfast Planning Board. I'm writing to tell you how brilliantly and convincingly members of the Northport Village Corporation, Upstream Watch, Friends of Harriet L. Hartley Conservation Area, local citizens for smart growth, and other citizens from Lincolnville, Northport, Belfast, Belmont, and Searmont presented their cases. It must have been abundantly evident to the Planning Board that Nordic's permit application should be immediately denied or at least tabled until completed analysis and recommendations from the Bureau of Environmental Protection, the Army Corps of Engineers, and other relevant agencies in the courts were made available to them. Unfortunately, although the board respectfully listened, my sense from the visible attitude and the few verbal comments made by members of the Planning Board and other city officials was that the public and expert statements were gratuitously being accepted and tolerated so that the board could claim it had listened to public opinion. I'm not optimistic about how the Planning Board will rule. To heighten my concern about how much public opinion and scientific testimony might count, that very day, despite much scientific evidence and public opinion, the Maine State Public Utilities Commission ruled in favor of the CMP gas corridor from Canada to Massachusetts through the western Maine wilderness. I have to conclude that public opinion and scientific evidence are no match for corporate money and political pressure when it comes to our regulatory agencies. So I'm equally pessimistic about future rulings on the Nordic Fish Factory from the Maine State Board of Environmental Protection. This is not to say that public statements, demonstrations, and scientific presentations should be abandoned. They remain a thorn in the side of Nordic and have slowed their development and ability to garner additional funding. What I'm saying, however, is that in my opinion, the best and perhaps the only way to stop Nordic will be in the courts. Nordic's Achilles heel is their lack of ownership or permission to drive their intake and discharge pipes across the Harriet L. Hartley Conservation Area at the mouth of the Little River. It's imperative that this tidal zone be defended and remain in private ownership. The legal resistance to Nordic, however, is exceedingly costly, and its burden should be shared first by those most at risk, and then also those concerned about our shared environment and economy. We now have 3 suits in federal and state courts challenging Nordic, and have also been bearing the cost of defending ourselves against very dubious countersuits. If you've never heard of the SLAP suit, check John Oliver's YouTube commentary, which you can find on HBO. Instructive, amusing, and frightening all at the same time.
Excuse me, Mr. Block.
I
How much
have-
longer is your?
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Nordic is an existential threat to Bayside. As great as was the failure of our wells 20 years ago, and is now regarding the rising level of the bay that threatens our seawall and our sewer system. In the past, and at substantial cost, our community dealt with the water shortage and is now contending with the predicted effects of climate change. Unfortunately, we must also understand, proactively address, and commit ourselves to defeating Nordic. The warm, nitrogen-rich effluent from Nordic's wastewater discharge pipe will form a constant 100 million gallon plume of nitrogen-rich warm effluent just off our shore and subject to onshore winds and storm current shifts. Our beaches, our swimming, our sailing, our property values, our ability to rent our cottages, and more, all are at risk. The eventual financial cost to Baysiders personally will be substantial. The cost to us as a community will be even greater. I'm asking you to recognize the threat. I'm asking you to extend your formal opposition to Nordic to include the Friends of the Harriet L. Hartley Conservation Area. As individuals, your financial support for the legal efforts to protect and preserve the conservation area will be exceedingly important and greatly appreciated. Supporting the Friends will be the best way to stop Nordic, protect yourselves, ourselves, and Bayside. So please think about what stopping Nordic will be worth to you. I'm also adding a copy of my statement to the Belfast Planning Board, and I appreciate your patience in listening to me this morning. And if you need any more information about the conservation area, let me know.
Thank you.
And the secretary would like that on a memory stick or email. I can do that.
I was just going to say, rather than my retyping these, if they're available in some way electronically, since
Yeah,
I'm the
so
person
you want me
who's...
to send it to you?
Thank you.
Yeah, he's the secretary by default.
Since I'm the one who's writing them up, it would be great to have. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, Sid.
I also have something to, as a resident, all right?
Go right ahead.
I have a 9-page letter to read in. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to read the whole thing, John. I'm going to actually give it to everybody to read later. But I did want to go over a couple of things that I think are important. I've been working quite a bit with the Upstream Watch folks and during the month while we were out, and we've been sort of working together on this. And I think I'm becoming more and more concerned that they are not willing to do the right things permitting-wise. They being Nordic Aquaforms, are not willing to provide the information that's necessary to find out if the facility is going to cause problems or not. And that's really concerning. They have shifted gears from, we have an open door policy, to, we've given you everything we're going to give you, now give us our damn permits, is really where they are at this point. And that's what's happened, and it's unfortunate because you really can tell, I've been doing this for many decades now, and you can tell a lot about a proponent by the way they approach their permitting. You can tell a lot about how they're going to interact with the community, the way they approach their permitting. And this is a very top-down approach, and maybe it's a European-American thing where this is the way they do it there. I don't know, but it's not the way we do things around here. And it's very concerning that we've asked multiple times for data, and it has not been provided. They provided many reports and analyses in their permitting applications, and they won't provide any of the backup material. They won't even provide what the inputs were. So all that is very concerning. And just to touch a little bit on my letter, and again, I'll send a copy in to you and to Dan, so it can just go out to everybody. This was the letter that I did to the planning board. The planning board meeting that he was talking about, Upstream Watch had 45 minutes to do a presentation, and I got cut off halfway through mine because it's just regular people talking. When it was run through during practice, it went faster, and then the people got nervous, and everybody used a couple extra minutes. So by the time they got to me, I ran out of time. And it's also been sort of part of this process is that Nordic gets to talk for as long as they want at these meetings, and then everybody else gets shortened to very short periods of time. And so nobody really gets to express their opinions. They cut off comments at the last meeting.
Mike, please.
Hold on, no, this is my report as well. They cut off comments at the last meeting and to allow for Nordic to rebut, okay? So that's all I'm going to say about that. The two things I wanted to highlight from this relative to what affects Bayside residents, which is the whole point of this, is that we need to put the size of project in perspective for everyone. So I kind of did a little bit of a comparison that I think people can understand, because I was thinking, how could Bayside residents and everybody understand how big this project is? Well, when they talk about things in gallons per minute and short periods of time, we don't get our bills in gallons per minute. We get our bills monthly and yearly and daily, we think of things, but not in those short periods of time. So if I just give you a few examples and the size of populations they would serve, okay? So, for example, the wastewater is 7.7 million gallons a day. That's 2.8 trillion gallons a year, and that would serve a city with a population of 66,000 people. So they're building a treatment plant for 66,000 people. Water, 1.7 million gallons a day, or 600 plus million gallons a year. That would serve a city of 32,000 people. So they're pulling enough water out of the ground for 32,000 people in our little area. The power plant that they're building is 330 kilowatts, or 123 million kilowatts a year. That would serve a city of 48,000 people. This is their backup peak shaving generator system. The solid waste they'll be producing is 110,000 pounds a day, or 180 million pounds a year, or the amount of waste that's created by 25,000 people. The fish that they're going to produce is going to be 200,000 pounds a day, or 73 million pounds a year, or if you look at what the national average consumption is, enough for 30 million people. So that's enough salmon they're going to create in Belfast, right down the street from us, to feed the annual demand of all of New England twice over. So that's the size of the facility. And just for a little bit of comparison, then I looked at the 4 largest cities in Maine. Okay, and if you look at the 4 largest cities, we have Portland, it's 66,400, and that's comparable to the NAF wastewater treatment plant. Lewiston is 36,000 people, and that's comparable to the power plant. Bangor is 32,000 people, that's comparable to their water plant. South Portland is 25,000 people, and that's comparable to the amount of solid waste that they're using. So when we're talking about we want to look at this and we want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, they're building all of the infrastructures that a city would have within 30 acres in one spot. They have to provide that information for people to be able to understand it and review it. This is not the type of project that can be done on a conditional basis. In other words, give us the permits and we'll figure out how to do it as we go. And that's been their approach so far, and that's all I have to say about that. And again, I'm speaking for Upstream Watch here and really as myself.
And you'll submit that electronically?
I will submit the whole thing electronically so everyone can read it, okay?
And
I
thank
hope
you
I
very
didn't
much
take
for
too much
all the work
time.
you've been doing.
I apologize for
That's
how
quite
much
all
time.
right. I just know that there's more coming.
I know. It's just that we haven't had a meeting for 2 months because we take December off, so it ends up.
Part of the challenge of being a volunteer board.
Yes.
Anything else from anyone else attending the meeting? Questions or issues? Steve?
You have a letter from Diana Eastie?
Yes, I was going to address that later on, but
And that's fine if you choose to do that.
during the tree warden's report, I thought was the appropriate time. So, moving on, report of the treasurer.
Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to circulate warrants. These are the December warrants only. I've not yet had a chance to compile the November warrants, so I'm not looking for your signatures at this time. Those have all been paid, so from a vendor perspective, we're current with everything we should be doing. Judy, could you circulate the 2 piles of financial documents sitting at your shoulder there? So we're going to send around a couple of pieces of information. We've done our first closing for last fiscal year. This always requires revisions and corrections. There are some things, for example, approving expenses for the village truck that aren't done until we close the year and make sure that we have the funds that we need to do those sorts of things. So that process will begin shortly. All you will see on the financial statements are some comments about some areas that I still need to review. So I'm really not providing you a full breakdown as to the hows and whys of things that are variances. The second closing I will get done as quickly as I can and pass it along to the accounting firm They'll make those entries, I'll issue you a full commented report, and that's the second closing that we use for the audit. What I would like to do, however, is there's another document that I call the preliminary net income statement, just to give you an idea how the year looks like it's shaking out. And I guess the best way to look at it is at the very top, you talk about net income, which is in the financial statements. And there are things included in that number that really aren't part of our operating budget. Most notably, the seawall in North Street, which are going to be pulled from reserves. And in addition to that, an error was made where part of the Cove Road project was charged to general government. In addition to those in the category that says to be posted to 2019, we still need to spend out of that $26,343, $2,000 for truck replacement. It did not look like the pre-purchased gravel has appeared on the statements as it should have, and we still owe our trash collection people some money. So that reduces the net income. And why do we have that net income? That's that list below there. Most notably, when we're trying to work through the challenges of having accurate financial reporting, we ask people to hold back on spending. So we asked infrastructure not to do road maintenance and not to do some of the wharf maintenance. That's a big chunk of change. We had a windfall in hydrant rental at the bottom because we had budgeted to have a hydrant that utilities did not put in early, so we had a one trimester windfall. So what it comes down to is that we would have, if this were perfect and there were no other changes to the financials, we would end up with $18,592 in net income. And our goal has always been zero one way or another. Those would normally flow to reserves. What will happen this time is we were originally authorized to spend a certain amount of money for the seawall project in North Street to fund that, pulling that from reserves. Because we have that windfall, all we will draw from reserves is $25,970 instead of $44,000. So, I mean, it's a good thing. You know, we're not depleting our reserves. We have some extra money. The downside of that whole project is that we didn't get some road work done that we really would like to have done. Didn't do some work on the wharf we would like to have done. Any questions about that? That's just a quick preliminary look at the world. All good?
Just a minor little typo.
Yep.
Positive, you've got your eyes gathered together.
That I do.
Yeah,
I'll clean that up. Thank you.
yeah,
So,
really good work.
on old business, our new accounting firm has been a real godsend. They're easy to work with, and given the speed of transition, they've done a fabulous job, recognizing that there's still work to be done. There are some things being coded to the wrong accounts, even though the invoice is very clearly coded as to where they should go. We'll work through those difficulties. I'm not worried about those. And,
In terms of the monthly cost, can you remind us what they are?
well, so we just are paying an invoice for $1,200, which is down from the $3,000 we had with the other firm, and that includes a bunch of transition costs and cleaning things up.
So expect that to go down.
It should go down. We're going to have additional expenses as we go through the audit, I'm sure. The intent is we'll get down to about the $600 number we had before. So we'll see what happens.
And where are they?
This is
Portland.
Portland, same people that we work with from the outset.
Okay, great.
So the last piece relates to the budget. So it's time to start the 2021 budget process. I would like to do it differently this year. So I'm requesting formally today input from the overseers, particularly the safety, personnel, and infrastructure committees for their budgets. The document you have in front of you is, I think, well suited to that purpose. You know what you spent in this past year. Think about what you want to do next year and build a budget just like you did at this time last year. I will develop the remainder of the budget. What I've tried to do in past years is get the overseers very involved in the budgeting process. That is a very labor-intensive process for me, so I'm not going to do that this year because I simply don't have time to do it with all the other things that we're trying to do to get our office manager in place and make sure we get all the work done that has to happen. So, any questions?
What were the three committees that you want to put from, sorry, safety?
Safety, personnel, and infrastructure.
Thank you. Not waterfront also?
What is waterfront?
Are there any budgetary needs from the waterfront?
They're minor. I'll get you something.
I mean, if you, like I said, and I also said overseers, so I don't really care what the input comes from,
Okay.
but whatever you see that you'd like to make sure is in that budget, just please make sure I know about it.
Yeah.
And is there a date that you're looking for things by?
Sure, how about Wednesday? No, I mean, it's a process, it takes some time. I don't need it in a month, I really don't need it in 2 months, but recognize that we want to pull a budget together for the overseers to look at far enough in advance so that when we start developing warrants and preparing the annual report, we know what we're doing.
Right.
So I really don't want to be doing this in June.
Got it. And Michael Terrell, who's on the phone, you've heard all that, and it's okay by you?
Yeah, Steve, I had a question. The form you're referring to, is that in the email as well, or can you send it?
I will email it to you. Everyone else here has a hard copy, so I'll fire that off to you, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
So,
I just have one comment, John, about the new phone system when appropriate.
Do it now.
It's great. There's one byproduct, though, of all these speakers. It's interesting how it ends up backgrounding the person speaking and foregrounding everyone's fidgeting. So it's it's odd. Everything's clear as a bell, but I'm hearing everybody fidgeting, moving things on desks, and hardly hearing the speaker. I don't know what to do about that.
Interesting, because there is an awful lot of paper all around the table today, so.
Good feedback. That's good feedback.
Good
We're
feedback.
we're moving the speakers, see if this is better, okay?
And also, Michael, you are so much clearer than you used to be.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to eliminate fidgeting entirely, but
Hands on your side.
point taken. Thank you.
it can be helpful to get some mouse pads to put those on.
Oh, well, there you go.
I have some extra mouse pads, probably.
There you go.
Any other issues with the treasurer? Questions? Hearing none, we're going to move on to the committee reports, and Mike Lannon, who heads the infrastructure committee, correctly asked if we could move whatever the committee wants to talk about, especially the seawall project, to the top of the list. We're assuming this is going to take a little while, so
It'll take a little bit.
whatever it takes.
So, we had a meeting this morning, the infrastructure committee went over sort of the nuts and bolts of it. I don't know if the overseers want to hear the nuts and bolts of it. I sort of thought of the split as nuts and bolts at 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock, we talk about permitting, timeline, and budget. Does that seem good?
Go ahead.
Excuse me. So, I have Mike Sabatini and Regina Leonard here from two different firms.
And Kishore should still be on the line we have him for a little while longer, so.
So I thought we could just start with I would just start with a little sort of general thing of where we are in this, okay? So where we are is that we have received a set of plans here, and I won't touch too much because it's here. We have a full set here for the office, and we have some half-size sets, and we have sets for everybody to review. I sent them to Dan Webster, and he's going to post them, so anybody can comment on them. The design will be finalized, this is a 75%. At 75%, you know, we're really looking at, the design is pretty much done and we're working on details at this point. 75% done for this, 90% done for North Avenue, which we'll talk about at the end. Excuse me. And so for today, the seawall is, I'll do a little bit of an intro. And the seawall is, we're replacing the wooden crib wall from the boat ramp down to the edge of the causeway, up the causeway. We stop at the new work that was done by Proc approximately 10 plus years ago. 10-ish, is that?
And thinking the age of my kids, more than 10.
Yeah, we think of it as 10, so it's got to be 20, right? So, and then down the other side, and then a short wall that's going to be in front of the riprap to protect the building. And then we're going to add riprap, more riprap from the edge of that wall over to the edge of the yacht club to protect the wastewater treatment plant. At that point, the angles are such that it's really hard for anything to really happen to the yacht club that needs more than what's there already. So we're going to sort of stop right there. And a lot of that work was done coming the other way because it's weird the way that works out. One of the houses owns part that doesn't look like they own it. It comes around the corner there. So the corner is owned privately. We own from, really sort of from Michael's house up past the yacht club all the way around. So that's where we are with the design. I think that they came up with an excellent solution here. It's pretty large size blocks. The circle will remain similar to the way it is. It will come back approximately 20 feet. They have gotten the design directly from Dirigo and have inserted it into this so that the coordination is there. The idea is that all the site work for the Dirigo project would come in off of this because this is really part of, it makes sense for one person to do all the site work. Excuse me. So that's basically where we are with this. We have plans and sections and details, and I think I'll turn it over to these guys to talk about any one of those things in whatever order you like.
So I think, Mike, you want to just go over the permitting piece?
Sure, I can talk about
First.
permitting first. What's been done thus far is I've sent in material enough to ask for a pre-application meeting. Turns out that they're switching up management at DP, and I'm having to deal with another gentleman. And that's slowed things down a little bit, but I'm in contact with him. He's looked at what I've sent him thus far, and the good news is he doesn't feel like we even need a pre-application meeting. He said this is going to be pretty straightforward. There's concurrence that it doesn't qualify for a permit by rule. However, it will need an individual NRPA permit, but it doesn't need all of the bells and whistles because of what we're doing. Because all the infrastructure's there, it's repair and maintenance, but it's expanding the scope of it a little bit. One other little tidbit on that is, if you look closely at the causeway repair, we're straightening up the alignment. That causeway is kind of sloughed. By virtue of that, the high water line comes in, which is the jurisdictional coastal wetland. So we're actually impacting coastal wetland. It will not need compensation, but we are going to straighten out the wall, and we are going to impact the coastal wetland a little bit. I'm poised to, since we don't need a pre-application meeting, to submit this.
Sorry. Is somebody on the phone trying to say something?
Not me.
Okay, Mike Sabatini is still talking.
Okay, so I'm poised to submit this in the next week or two, just to get the ball rolling. As we know, when we talk about schedule, this is a crucial element because it is a full individual permit. They do have 3 months to review this. Hopefully it takes less than that. One other little aspect of this is North Ave and the riprap beyond the chlorination building. I'm pushing pretty hard for those two pieces to be exempt from NRPA permitting. There's a couple of exemptions. There's repair and maintenance and public works. Specifically the North Ave one, there's already drainage there. There's already riprap there. It feels like it's just a repair of other non-functioning systems, and they're all public works. So I'm hoping that's the case. If that happens to not be the case for whatever reason, I just need to pull those details in on the permit and filing. So I'll stay in close contact with DP on that.
Do you know how soon they'll make that piece of their determination?
So when maybe even before I submit, I'm going to formalize that with the manager and in writing. So.
Any questions for Mike regarding permitting?
One other thing, I have been in touch with Dirigo, and I did get good information from them, and we will coordinate further on any site work. I asked him if he felt like he needed any permitting for that building, or if he had accounted it for anything.
Okay.
And he said no.
Okay.
But I don't know if we want to pull that into this as well, if it's necessary. I know there's a generator slab there, and I mean, it's all kind of on top of an existing thing.
What have they done with 2B, anything?
They've talked with 2B,
Okay, right.
and they have talked with.
Our code enforcement officer.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
talked with her as
so
well.
they have done, they have done the same type of thing you're doing, which
Okay.
is, this is what we're thinking of doing, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
And they had that conversation with 2B in October,
Right.
so I don't know if they've had further conversations, that'd be a good follow-up.
I mean, that part isn't in our scope, but if it makes sense to coordinate, we can talk about that,
Okay.
just for efficiency's sake.
And then, so that's, I mean, that's great. I think it's everything we had talked about. I know we had talked about trying to get some things in December, but with the change of DEP, what Beth Callahan's no longer.
It's Don Hollowell, it's who manages the review process, and it's Don Hollowell normally would have it, it's now the Spent Cohen and Jim Day.
Oh, okay.
By the way, I want to say I appreciate the infrastructure committee going through all this at 8 o'clock, a lot of the
Yes.
details that make this meeting a lot more efficient, so thank you. And thank you.
Yeah.
Regina?
Yes, I just wanted to briefly talk about the timeline, and then I'm going to have Kishore walk through the structural costs associated with the walls, and then Mike will give an overview of the site work costs. Essentially, our timeline is we're still on schedule for an early February wrap-up of the final design. Again, the permitting will have some impacts on the bid schedule, but we will have the drawing set finalized into the committee for review in early February. And with that, I guess, Kishore, do you?
Well, before we do that, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the timeline for the village.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to
because
piggyback
we
on
moved
that.
our meeting to February 2nd, which is as early in February as you can get.
Yep.
Is that, so this
No, no, I
timeline
thought
for
we
you for permitting,
Okay.
so our meeting's February 2nd.
Yep.
Will we be poised then to be acting on whatever we need to act on?
Let's take a step back. That's why I wanted to talk more about the schedule for a minute. Of course, it goes to sleep right now. So, when we were talking about this during the summer, there was a talk about the timeline relative to getting all the permitting, design, and funding in place, the three sort of legs of the stool, to get to the construction period in the fall. And during the summer, we had talked about the financing that was going to be done via bonding. And to do that, we had to have the design done and ready to bid by February. So that was the goal. We have since learned, when we were talking to Steve about that the bonding now is a little bit different, and we could do a short-term loan and then do the bonding in the fall. And that's what we had talked about last month. Since then, Jeffrey and I have spoken to Dan Pittman at your firm, who's going to do the be our bond counsel. And I think this is more a sign of the times than anything else, but I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but it used to be that a lot of times people would go for bonds because the municipality might not have the best credit rating, and that might be the only place they could get a bond and so on. But now with sort of freer money, I think they've kind of changed the rules a little bit, and anybody can almost get a loan. So what Dan said is now what the bond bank likes and what they prefer these days is that you actually take out the bonds after you finish the construction project. Right. So that would mean, and he would say that you wouldn't go in the fall. Nobody goes in the fall. You do it again next spring. So we should be looking for a loan for 15 months. So what that means is that we need to get a loan, and the amount is the 1.6 that we authorize. It's similar to a home construction loan, where you only draw when you provide information of why you need that money, and then you draw it down. You can draw it down for the design folks, for permitting, for whatever it is. And then we pay interest on that. I was talking to someone at Camden National Bank, and we can do it either interest only or interest in principal. He recommended the interest in principal because when we go to the bond bank, they count that year as part of the max 30 years, so we can only get a 29-year loan anyway. So we should start paying it out of, it was his suggestion, but it's totally up to us and how we structure it and Steve and everything. So where we are with how that affects the timeline, right, is that we now don't have this rush to get it done immediately. However, what Proc Marine said still holds true, which is we want to have it finished and bid as soon as possible, because if people can put it on their schedule as backlog, you're gonna get more people to bid, and then we're gonna get a better price. So we still are pushing like crazy to get it done. So having that meeting on February 2nd when we have this is fine. I mean, I would propose that if everything's okay, that we authorize this now and have the bond bank attorney go forward and start that process. Obviously, if we were gonna borrow money, we could have started this process sooner, so we should start that one now so that that one's not the thing that's the slowest. Because we do have to do, one more thing. So that we do have to do the bond bank thing twice now. We have to do it once for the bank, because that's the way you get the cheap rate at the bank. If the bank doesn't have to pay interest, it doesn't have to pay taxes, excuse me, the interest rate is lower.
Right.
So that's worth that right there, to pay that lawyer twice, first to do that. And then a lot of it overlaps in the second one, but he has to do more due diligence for the actual bond bank. So that's the,
So what might be confusing is when we say the bond process twice, but it's using bond counsel to certify it as a municipal
Correct.
borrowing.
That's right.
A type of municipal borrowing, but one is from a private lender and the other is from the bond.
that's exactly right.
Well, and actually.
Thank you for getting that right.
And actually, the loan is called a bond anticipation note.
Yeah, bam.
Yeah.
He has notes
Yeah.
from our call. That's why we had two people, so we could make sure.
So just so I understand, the bond anticipation note for 1.6 million would be gotten in the near future?
Yes.
And in 2021, it would be the actual main bond bank bond,
After.
which would repay that essentially.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
And for this, we need an attorney?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it has to be done right or none of it works.
That's why we're always so hyper about the initial vote and the wording of the initial vote, because from day one, it has to all be certifiable as proper municipal bond borrowing.
All right, yes, Miles.
Rates are comparable?
Rates are comparable,
Between
Miles said.
the first borrowing and the bond?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, what happens is your value in a bond is in the latter years. So the bond anticipation note would be comparable to what you pay if you went and did the bond in advance, but the bond bank doesn't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, so we actually pay different rates throughout the life of the bond.
Right. So we've gone from schedule to the dollar piece of schedule.
Right, so how that fits into the whole picture then is we get the design by February, the final design, right?
February 2nd?
February 2nd, yes.
So
that's
that
the.
was my question, that's okay
Okay,
for you?
Yes.
just make sure you're saying yes at your end too.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
and by then, the permitting should be underway, right? And the clock is starting on that. We don't need the permit in place to bid it. We can bid it without it, with the anticipation of it, with Mike explaining that everything's set, talk to this person if you have any issues type thing. And we should be able to bid it, so we can bid it, as we were talking about still on our April timeline, to bid it out. March or April is what we had talked about. And then, so we can hopefully bid it in that time frame still. And then we should have the costs, and then that way people will have, a good 5 or 6 months to put it on their schedule. And the goal, again, still is to start right after the around Islesboro race would be the first weekend that they would be allowed to start.
So at the February 2nd meeting, my understanding is we'll have the 100% design, am I correct?
Correct.
And the overseers would vote to accept that full design,
I think February 2nd is a Monday.
February 2nd?
I think February 2nd is a Monday. Let me just look.
It's a Sunday.
It's Super Bowl.
It is Super Bowl Sunday.
That's okay, it doesn't matter in New England anymore.
So, but I don't see any reason at this point to, what are we doing at that meeting here with this?
Well,
We're
we
just
would
gonna have to-
approve the final design.
Well, I think we should do it today based on this stuff, because this is the final design.
So you're recommending that we not have a meeting on February 2nd? And
Well, no,
go back to our other meeting, or?
February
what-
16th?
I mean, we could have a meeting to formally approve this, but we could do that in March, because we're gonna get the stuff on that right then. If people wanna read it and look at it and formally, approve it again, But I mean, I think we have enough information here to suggest this is more design than we get on many
Right,
projects, so
Okay.
right.
we're already beyond what we would normally
It's
get.
a different question that
Yeah,
I
okay.
have, I'm not articulating it well.
Okay,
We jumped through a lot of hoops last time to move the meeting up to February 2nd because we thought that we would need it for bidding, to approve a bid package or a borrowing package.
right, because,
But we don't, you're saying we don't need that now because have essentially today what will be what we will essentially see on February 2nd. So what I'm floating out there is, on February 2nd, we would not have full financials for January. So if there's an opportunity to restore our old meeting schedule, is that what you're suggesting?
Yes,
Are you saying that
yes.
February 2nd is really an empty exercise now?
it is empty, because at that time, last meeting, what we were talking about was we were gonna have to get this thing lined up to get in the queue, to get this thing approved for the borrowing, okay? Right, we had already pushed it to the fall, but we were trying to get this thing approved so that we could get to bidding, so that we could get on that track for the fall, and we don't need to do that. He said just do it for the spring next year, which is when most of the money is distributed.
Okay, so is there an appetite for restoring our February meeting to where it originally was, which is consistent with the treasurer's needs for giving
Yes.
us financials?
I think we should do that for
Is
this.
that, you've already jumped through hoops to make February 2nd happen? Would, if we,
I don't know about jumping through hoops, pick a date that you want to meet, and if it works for people, that's great.
I have rearranged my schedule.
Okay.
February 2nd, I'm not available on the 16th.
okay,
I'm
then,
either.
yeah, so let's stick
Not
it.
available on the 16th.
I'm on a plane with 3 kids. I'm not.
Yeah.
Sounds like the second is.
The second, so, yeah.
You might
because-
rather be.
I might be here, but I will not.
Right. So having changed it, we all changed everything, so let's stick with the change.
Thank you.
That seems fair.
Jeffrey?
But, Mike, I think what we need today is authorization to instruct bond counsel to start the RFP process for the bond authorization.
Yes.
That becomes very important because that gets the financing piece of it moving.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. All this finance information generally used to come through Steve. There was a big brouhaha after our last meeting about financing and committees. Are we turning all this financing stuff over to the infrastructure
No.
committee, or is it
No.
going through?
No. We just had a discussion just so we could understand the process. So Steve's still doing what Steve does. This was just so we could understand from bond counsel how it works.
And what they've talked about is no different than what we talked about
Yeah.
before.
Yeah,
It's just, it helped them understand what Steve was telling us in November. And that's great, that now.
So when you say us, you mean the board?
more of the
So the
infrastructure.
board starts, the
Yeah.
board starts the process, which means Steve starts the
Yeah.
auditing process.
Authorizing Steve to talk to the attorney to start the pre-op, the authorization.
So I do have a question though, do we need a final design to do that? In which case, we'll start February 2nd.
Dan Pittman did not think we did need the final design because what triggers the financing piece of it is the borrowing cap that was put in place at the annual meeting.
Right,
So
so,
it's about up to 1.6 million. It's more driven by the up to 1.6 million than it is by the design.
right, so in theory, we could have called the bond council the day after the meeting to start that process.
Yeah, which you
We did.
essentially did.
Right, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In other words, there's no reason to wait to do that because he's got to do a bunch of things and jump through a bunch of hoops and find the right bank and everything.
I think that, I'll just say out loud, that what may cause people concern. Steve has served us so well on all of these pieces, and I think we all want to be comfortable that it's Steve who's really driving that. From as soon as we vote today, it's Steve who's going to drive the conversations with Dan, make sure we do everything right. Is that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this was just a conversation so we could understand
Right.
more deeply how the thing.
That's right, that's exactly right. That's all we've been asking about for months now, is to
He
do
did
that.
build it,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there
There's more discussion to be had, but it sounds like we're going to end up with two votes today. One is to accept this design, and two will be then to authorize Steve to move forward with the financing piece of it. Am I correct? So let's continue with the discussion. This is all coming back, Regina, and I didn't know if you wanted to hand it off to someone else or not, about the design itself.
Yeah, Kishore had to go, apologies. He had a prior commitment and I had to hold him on as long as possible, but he just had to jump off the call. So essentially, we developed a cost estimate which we provided to the group, and we have detailed out the design. Can I use that? Sorry, I left my copy. We have detailed out the design really into two sections. We have the seawall project section, which we have subdivided. This is just for the ease of organization. So I'll talk first about the seawall project, and then I'll let Mike, he'll go over the site part of the seawall project, and then jump into the North Avenue project. So essentially, for the seawall replacement project, we've included a cost for disposal of the existing crib wall, the wood crib wall that's out there. And then we've provided a cost for taking the blocks that are too small, the granite blocks that are too small for the proposed seawall project. We've assumed that you would like to keep these since they have value, but we've provided a cost to relocate those and stack them somewhere within the village so you can figure out where you would like to use those. And the project as described by Kishore this morning, we've itemized it into kind of the structural excavation costs, the granite blocks, which are the facing blocks, but they're they're larger in size. And then structural backfill behind the wall sections. And then we had talked about the crushed stone to allow the drainage flow in and out of the wall sections with a compacted gravel surface. We've also provided costs to reset, we're calling them the boulders, but it's the existing stone material that is acting as essentially riprap at the base of the wall. So we provided a cost to move that out of the way so we can do construction and then setting that back in place. And then the dewatering cost is an assumption that's based on what Kishore described as constructing the wall in the tidal cycles, assuming we can complete 10 linear feet of wall segment at a time. And so the dewatering is based on a cost per day, assuming that it's a 40-day cycle for construction. So that dewatering cost is inclusive of pumping and basically keeping the site free of water for construction.
What exactly is dewatering?
Dewatering is basically pumping the water out of the construction area. Yeah. And there's a maintenance cost too, because it needs to be maintained by staff. So essentially where we're ending up when we include a mobilization cost of 7%, and then we always include a contingency. As we get farther along with the design, that contingency goes from say a 15% down to a 10%. So where we're at currently is 1.14 million for the actual wall work that has to happen on site. And then the site work itself, Mike, if you want to just take a couple minutes and walk through that.
What is mobilization?
Mobilization is the cost to get the construction equipment and staff to the site. Oh, sorry.
Site work is pretty self-explanatory. There are some erosion and sediment controls around the inlets when you put catch basins, but mainly there's the aspects of this are the drainage, there's the pavement, removing the circle back and repaving it, there's gravel surfaces outside of that circle, and there's some of this is we're putting in assumed quantities, because we may get to some areas of this in this, the surface or the existing gravels are stable and deep enough, and we can keep them in place and just put surface gravel on. So we have some, placeholder quantities.
So can I ask a question there? Are your assumptions based on a worst-case scenario?
I'd say middle of the ground.
So they could go up?
They could go, yeah. And I could switch, if you would prefer, we could switch that to a worst case.
That's what the contingency is.
Yeah, the contingencies in there. So I don't have
Steve
too much.
doesn't like us double counting contingencies, right? Bloating up budgets and then adding contingency on top.
I don't, I can talk about each individual item if you have any questions, but it's pretty self-explanatory.
So the total, the site and the seawall together come to 1.27
Yes, plus the engineering.
plus the engineering. But where are we on engineering? Sorry.
90,000 for the engineering.
It's right down below it.
Oh, that's the 92 down there, okay.
They didn't highlight that one, because they're engineers, they don't want to highlight their own costs.
So it was 1.36.
Yeah.
And then North Street, I'm just trying to figure out the 1.6, and if we can say that we obviously are below that. North Street is much smaller.
Well, remember North Avenue and North Street, I can't remember which one it is either.
North Ave on the plan.
Okay, North Ave is not part of this budget. It was part of the design part. So
Okay.
they did that part. That's why this one's 90%,
Okay.
because it's essentially done, except for the last few.
I hadn't noticed that, thank you.
Oh, yeah, so I pushed and said that one has to be done, because that was out of last year's budget with the, we voted
You're
the year before. We do not have authorization to construct North Avenue from the voters.
Right, okay.
Right? Is that right, Steve?
That is
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have a cost on the North Avenue?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
The
It's the
last
second
couple-
page
last
here.
couple pages.
Oh, wow.
And also pretty self-explanatory, there is, erosion and sediment control, there's gravels and pavements and storm drain and catch basins.
It's the whole, it's a big, it looks like it's
Oh,
more.
North Avenue, oh, I see,
It
okay.
just has a lot of site work, so it has a lot of individual things, but they're not.
26,000, is that what we're talking about? Drop the bucket.
Right, so it comes to a
That
total
would be out of,
of 26,000 with contingency. And as the plan shows, it allows for a catch basin to be constructed, a storm drain outfall, riprap slope, and new pavements and gravels up on North Ave and Field Walk. And,
So my question is about the removing the granite blocks that we own and storing them somewhere else for another purpose. Clearly, you evaluated incorporating them into the project, and you've decided that they're not suitable?
Yes, correct.
well, no, there's multiple size boulders out there. There are some that are small, and that they're not really of use to this, but they're good for decoration, or they could be used for, for grading issues if we had some runoff, and we could put them on the side to help later. So we could stack them up by one of our buildings and have that for another use at another time. They're just not big enough to hold back the sea in the storm. You wouldn't want them in there, they're detrimental to have.
Well,
them.
I'm talking about the granite blocks, not the riprap.
We don't have any real granite blocks. We
On the
have-
top, those things that are...
Well, they're more like granite step type things that you could use for, they're not really blocks per se, right?
So
I mean,
I'm
they're-
looking
I think they're too small and not.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're only like, from the top, they look really big. When you stand on them, you think they're big, but if you look at the side,
Right. My question had the preamble clearly. Regina said quickly, yes, and now you're adding nuance. So you're satisfied that this asset that we have is not a usable asset for this project?
Yes.
oh, yes, yeah,
Yes.
that part, yes.
So,
And these are granite blocks, not boulders.
right,
These ones are.
right.
Yeah, well, they're not really granite blocks, they're granite slabs.
They're granite.
Don't introduce nuance
They're
when your
rectangular.
engineer is saying that there is a clear answer why you're not using something and you're spending money on something else. So
Okay.
Have we calculated, this includes the cost of moving those?
Yes.
Have we looked at where
Slap
we're
that
gonna
in.
put them? Yeah, so, I don't think that that should bog down the approval here, but it is something we have to figure out because there is limited public space for storing stuff, and we're talking cars. Right,
Well, it
so-
shouldn't slow this down because we can
No.
donate them, we can give them away. It's just to be nice to keep.
Well, there's a good question, is there a market?
I think it needs consideration. These are big and heavy. Moving them is not something that's simple to do. Wherever they're going to be moved, they're going to be there probably for a while or given away or whatever. So it needs some consideration at a later date that the board has a discussion about. So I'll put that out there.
But Regina, what I'm hearing is the grand total, not of North Avenue, but of the seawall project is right now in the range of 1.36 million.
Correct. He can sell them to Scott as morning blocks.
Yep.
We're done.
So a quick comment on the granite blocks. If we were to decide we did not want them, we could say they're yours if you take them away and save ourselves $10,000.
Exactly.
Okay, that's one. Second piece, has there been any discussion about removing the old mooring blocks that are on the beach? That has been part of this discussion for years. I don't know where it is in here, or if it is in
Now,
here.
when you say old morning blocks, are you talking about the one, they're gonna talk about the ones that are butt up against the wall.
I'm talking about the ones that are all over the beach.
And that's a totally different subject. That's a subject for him.
I have spoken to Scott Monroe on this, and Scott Monroe has said that, this is years ago, he would remove them, but there is no incentive for Mr. Monroe to do that.
It needs to be paid.
I'm just noting that.
So we have some mooring blocks which have been used to shore up the seawall.
Those are already included.
Those are
in this.
included in this. It's the others that are scattered
The
about
stray
and are
ones that-
sort of interfering
They're
with
going
our
to stay where
beach.
they are.
Yeah, Diane Easty mentioned this over the summer during one of the meetings.
That's where the board needs to make a decision that no more blocks are put on the beach and not used.
Right.
Then he has to take.
It's a separate issue, apart from this project.
Yes, we don't need to talk about
Yeah,
that.
that's, yeah.
Okay, so I understand it is not currently part of this project. While we have a contractor here, if we can't get Scott to remove them, should we consider getting them moved?
Yes.
I mean,
Just something to think about, we can move on.
they should be moved, but that's not what we're talking about today.
Right.
That's not part of this
I
project,
just
but I
said
agree
that.
with you, yes.
Understood.
We've talked to, some of them are Scott's, so Scott should move the ones that are his. Some of them are Scott's that he inherited because he bought the company. So I would argue that those are Scott's too, even though they were existing before him, but again, it's subject for another day.
Okay, Judy?
So I want to go back to Steve's suggestion that if we told the contractor to take the granite blocks away, rather than place them somewhere for later use, that would save us $20,000. Where's that $20,000 number come
The
from?
last line on
Remove
the
that
first
store.
section.
Take them, take them away then, right? Were you saying have them taken away, or someone else who wants them will come and take them?
I'm
Give
saying,
them.
it might be worthwhile seeing if there was someone who had use of those blocks who would come
Yes.
and get them.
Yeah.
We don't pay them to take them away, they come and get these
I
granite
think-
blocks.
But they still have to be moved somewhere, so this
I think
other
the
person
labor-
comes and gets
The
them.
labor is taking them off the wall and
Yeah.
putting them on a truck. It's not as much where they go. That's gonna be there no matter what.
We would avoid the cost of taking them off the truck.
We would avoid that cost.
So
Okay.
there's, anyway, not a big deal, just making
Okay,
a
I
statement.
just wanted to know where the 20 was from.
Don't get hung up on it.
Yeah.
All right, we're back
So we
to
offered them for sale to the
this
park.
design.
It's always funny when one thing gets cut.
Okay.
Are there any other, what are the other questions or issues that people have for Mike or Regina about the design?
I want to
And the
go
cost.
to, do we move the circle back? Have we calculated the parking area, and do we still have the same parking area when we move the circle back?
Yes, that's a very good question, because we have a video running. We should talk about that. We have the same circle, it's 20 feet back. We will be losing 2 spots, right? The 20 feet at the end, if we put 2 cars on the end. But the parking in is still there, and the good part is now, you park in to the boulders, and there's actually room in front of the boulders for people for walking, and we can put some benches there as people would like. And also, we don't have the load of the cars pushing up against the wall now as much because they're not right up to there where they do now. And so,
So what impact on the parking is that going to have on the western side of this project at the base of the green space?
I would suggest that when we do the drainage modification off from Park Road down, that we could have more parking there. You could almost, depending on how it ends up, but this is being filled in with gravel. If you go to sheet SP1,
Yep, I'm there.
and if you look at the limit of work in the upper left corner, that there's a really wide trench here, right here,
Yep, I'm there, yep.
right, that trench there is, we're filling in that gully
Okay.
with gravel and a drain pipe, so that we can connect the storm drain up here. We had talked about resloping Park Road to get to that, but that can be done at a later date, if needed, right? But right now, all the water that runs down the hill now, we will collect as much as we can in that area. Because some of it mounds up in the dirt and still goes over. We'll fix that part, we won't fix anything in the gravel, in the driveway. But that area there then could be used for parking in the future, right, as we talked about.
Hold on, question from Bill.
I don't see where you're gonna only gain one parking spot there. You already can park there. You can just get farther away from the hot top, closer to the park. That's all you're creating,
If you
fill it in.
No,
You
you
already
fill it-
parked there.
if you fill it in,
So
you
the
can
only
park.
place that you're gonna gain a parking spot is where you're gonna have the catch basin down there.
Billy, think outside the box.
I'm
You
thinking
don't,
outside the box.
I know since cars have been invented, people park there parallel. But now without the gully, people can park straight in like they do all the way from around. Because you know how along there, people park parallel, but then once you get past the driveway or past that gully, people park straight in. Now you can park straight in all the way up there.
Well, and the reason I'm particularly asking about parking is because we're working on the revisions to the parking ordinance to introduce some reason. And
Right.
so I want to make sure that the reason that we're trying to introduce to parking is not defeated by this plan and is in fact complemented by this plan.
No, I mean, to me, this was one of the reasons we added this, was so that we could, if we did have any parking issues that were taken away from over here, we would be adding some. Because I see this as straight-in parking now, not parallel parking. So the cars are turned the other way, so we should be able to get.
So the maximum number of cars, spaces we'll lose is 2, is what I'm hearing. And it may be that we can improve upon that.
We might get those back here, at least.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe even double that. You understand what I mean?
Billy's not understanding. So
We'll deal with that
Billy,
in
is this-
2021.
the trench that we're improving here, is that where the cat o' nine tails grew
No.
from? Okay,
That was up across the park.
okay.
That was going great.
Other questions or issues regarding the plan?
Question on that, I'm just curious, since it's moving
I have
west,
Oh, wait,
Right.
one second.
I can't ask.
Go ahead, on the phone, who's that?
Yeah, that's Michael.
Yes.
Mike, I wonder if you could clarify just one question. When you're talking about the riprap coming around by the yacht club,
Yes.
I got a little confused there. How far do we cover?
On
At the yacht club building or I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, on SP1, you'll see that the granite wall from the wharf runs down. Then we have the half wall that runs behind the building, the new building. And then you'll see very black lines, black riprap, that's in line with the wall. That's an indication that that riprap has to be that level, right? So that's reworking all the way down to you get to in front of the yacht club, it goes past the barbecue area, and then it goes a little bit past the porch, and then ends about at the building.
So if you have the line in front of you, Michael, there's some darker lines, that's the new stuff. All the little gray boulders are the existing things.
So for those who are watching on film, the new construction will end roughly around the front of the building,
The front of the front of the yacht club.
past the porch, the beginning of the close-up. Thank you.
And then Gordon had a question.
Gordon,
I just wanted to ask a question.
go ahead.
Isn't there an area of riprap beyond that that looks, I've been seeing that before you get to where Harry's property begins, there's that area looks to me like it's not far off from needing to be addressed. So this scope can include that, or does it? All the way around to the border of Harry's property.
We had talked about leaving it to the engineers to look at how far they thought that we needed to go. Because of the angle that waves can hit this wall, in order for it to hit really inside of the yacht club there, the wind direction has to be such that it's no longer coming up the bay and slamming into us straight up the bay. It has to be turned more, and then you have Islesboro in the way, so it's not really, it's more of a cove at that point as opposed to direct exposure. That was what I thought the thought process was, and also to try to get a handle on cost and everything too, is you know.
Yeah, I mean, we had to stop somewhere. I wish Kishore was still on the line because he did a much more thorough inspection of the riprap slope. But having been down there a few times, it seemed like it was in pretty good shape in front of the yacht club. But
Pretty good shape, but what I'm wondering about is the town eventually is going to have to do that, right? Isn't that town responsibility, Bayside responsibility all the way in front of the yacht club, all that restaurant?
Oh, in front of the yacht club, but not in front of Harry's. Not over here, in front of the yacht
I'm not
club.
talking about Harry. I'm talking about in front of the yacht club up to the border of Harry. If that is eventually going to have to be redone, I mean, how far off are we from doing that? And wouldn't that be something to just naturally do now if costs can accommodate versus having to come back? Pretty good shape, doesn't sound like we're going to get many, you know, what would it be like to come back to have to do that versus doing it now?
I guess, I mean, I would make an argument that we'd want to do north of the boat ramp before we did that, frankly, because that is going to need replacement before that. We just had to stop the project somewhere on both sides. So this is where we are. If we want to try to expand and add north of the boat ramp and, you know, more, we'd have to go back to the annual meeting and do that. This one is technically included in this project, so I understand what you're saying, Michael, is if we want to do it, we could extend it, but I thought the idea was to try to limit it unless it was really necessary.
Well, what I'm hearing Mike Sabatini say is based on their on-site evaluation of the needs, they decided that what was necessary and appropriate was to the place where you stopped here. That the rest was not imminent or even within a reasonable timeline for need to be replaced.
I would agree with that, and I wish Kishore was on the line because it was really him that did the evaluation. Mine's more anecdotal from just being there and looking at it, in more of a general sense.
So
I'm comfortable personally with the evaluation of the engineers. I would think that when they knew what the range of our authorization was to spend and what our needs were, they went out of their way to design what we needed.
Miles?
I would just refer this question back to them and make sure they consider it.
Yeah, I think that would be the best bet is to maybe discuss with Kishore, because there's also the issue, as Mike's saying, you know, we were asked to sort of stop at a certain point, and so to the level of the evaluation, I know that we were asked to basically go beyond the new, I call it pump station, chlorination building, and then how to tie that in. So that's the lens at which we looked at the assessment and considered it.
But I think that the emphasis was, we were worried about the new building, and we were obviously always worried about the wastewater treatment plant, the tanks. So that was the emphasis. We are where we are with the cost, so if we wanted to go back and look at what it would be to add that, why don't we look at what it would be to take that line all the way to the end, and we'll just see what that adder is, because,
They saved $300,000 for about 4 minutes. In other words, what he told us.
no, I don't think that this is a big cost item, because this is adding riprap with equipment that's already on site, the mobilization is already there, you know, it's all those things, so that's,
Right,
so we can look at that, we'll definitely look at that.
Yeah.
Because we'll see what the adder is.
right.
I tend to think that this area is much more protected during most, it's all about risk, and the storm angles are never really this way, but we had that one freak storm.
Right. No, Michael's point is right. We have the luxury here with the authorization of 1.6 and the design coming in lower than that. We should do what we can do, rather than make work later.
Other questions for design team?
Just one more.
Yes, can I interrupt you just for 1 second? This is Bill Haverty from the Infrastructure Committee.
Go ahead, Bill.
I would like to add a positive note to the area of concern that we just talked about. Not too many years back, when Harry Rosenblum redid his seawall, the contractor was using behind the yacht club as access. And part of the deal is that area behind the yacht club that's of concern, and it's a good point, probably within the last 10 years, and maybe Billy Page could correct me, that area behind the yacht club deck, up to the bamboo property line, was reworked and they put some new rocks in there. So if this doesn't happen, or we don't see the need, I don't think it would be a big deal, because there was work recently done there in the last 10 years that appears to be holding up quite well.
Remember when Harry, and we gave him permission to do onto Bayside land?
It was more than 10 years, but yes, it was done.
Okay.
It's 10 years, but
Other questions or issues? Steve?
So we hear a lot about the work that is not being done by the state because of the increased construction costs relative to where they believe they'd be with expense. And I'm assuming that your work takes into account what you believe to be current highest costs, all that good stuff.
We've estimated based on what we understand to be the current costs. It's not, you know, obviously, we can't control the microclimate of that particular bid type, but yes, we factored that in.
Beautiful, thank you.
All I want to know is parking stays the same on the west side with the island moving a little bit.
That was
Stay
the
the same.
question that we got a sort of answer to.
wait, which is the west side now?
The west side, up to the base
Park,
of the green space.
Ruggles Park.
It's-
towards Ruggles. Still parking on that side of the circle.
Oh, absolutely, nothing over there is changing. Everything's changing, staying the same.
But you will have to move up into the park a little bit, probably.
Well, it'll be a little bit configured a little differently, because we want to still leave the open, unpaved areas to drag the floats up. So it'll just be shifted a little bit differently, and the cars might be a little bit more like this.
Take out that cement block.
Well, it's still in there, we could take it out. The cars are going to be closer to it.
Maybe they just
While they
shouldn't
put
park
it
there. Maybe they just shouldn't park there and kill the trees.
What trees?
We're
There are
not
no
near
trees
those.
there.
I'm just saying.
Maybe we can put trees there.
This is not time for the tree committee report.
Okay.
All right, other questions or issues for the engineers? Hearing none, I think it would be appropriate to have a motion to accept this design and move forward. I'll accept such a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the engineer's report for the seawall project? Say aye or nay. Aye here. Michael Terrell?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Very nice.
And then the next one would be to authorize Steve to contact the Dan Pittman. There's going to be a cost associated with that, right? And he estimates it at, what did he say, 7,500?
I think it's about $8,000, but it comes out of the bond anticipation note / bond.
Yeah, oh, 8,500 for the double set, because some of them overlap, right? That's what he said. I mean, he sent it to you too.
This is
That's part of the bill, that's just part of the whole
That's part
project.
of this whole.
Yeah, that's part of it, right, but
So we don't need
Well,
We need to,
No.
we need a motion
Get it
to
started.
authorize Steve to
To do it, right?
do it.
well,
Not to fund it, but to do it,
no, right.
To initiate the process,
right? Is that okay? Do we need that or no?
yes.
I move
Okay.
that Steve proceeds to initiate the process of getting the bond.
I second it.
I would make a recommendation that since Steve has already been working with bond counsel and these gentlemen have already talked with him, that we might want to authorize him to continue the work that they have done. And so as to bring this to conclusion.
I think we had, okay. It should be bond anticipation note is to get it back to it. That's what he's doing.
Mhm. This is a motion to authorize Steve to continue working with bond counsel to initiate the bond anticipation note. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
So I have only one question. When do you want/need money?
Well, we're incurring design costs.
Well, I understand that, but that's sort of a question that requires a date.
Yeah, well, I think we should try to get the thing approved as soon as possible, because we don't have to draw on it. We don't pay anything till we draw on it.
I get all that. So you don't have a date. I'll just get it when I get it.
I think you'll know the answer when you get the bills.
Okay.
What do you, I mean,
I think he's asking when's the first time you might want to draw.
He needs to know money's
Is that what
there.
you're asking?
I wanted to draw on it to pay the first bills from them, a long time ago, so,
The 30th of January.
yeah, okay.
I'm not ready.
So what we've spent money on so far was approved through the annual meeting last year, right? So we've been drawing from reserves to pay for all of the seawall and North Street, North Avenue work. That's where those funds have come from. That authorization is gone, we now have a new authorization. The new authorization takes the form of the bond authorization note and the bond. So essentially we can pull money from cash flow to an extent to pay bills until the bond anticipation note comes in.
Yeah,
But I'm wondering, given where our tax revenue comes in, we get a lot of money in September, we have a lot of bonds that get paid off through year end, and we end up using reserves to fund cash flow. This is not a new story, this is the way the village has operated for years and years. So what I'm trying to do is figure out what the impact is going to be to us and when those first bills start coming in that we need money for. That's all I'm trying to ask.
okay. The bills are gonna start coming in on January 30th, okay?
Got it.
Right? We're gonna get a bill from me January 30th,
Before that, maybe.
maybe even before that.
Thank you. Is there anything else that we need to keep these fine people here for? or-
Yeah, there's one more thing.
Go right ahead.
Talk about the North Ave.
North Ave.
North Avenue, yeah. So, we can run through the design, but what's clear from the whole process today is we need to know where the lines are. Okay, and so we need to do a survey. So that's not included in any budget, so we have to authorize that. That would be separate. So, they gave a quote of about $5,000.
And it's going to be landmark, does it?
Yeah. So we need to do that because we really need to be digging up into what, that quote driveway of the person on one side. And I think what Mike had originally drawn on the plans was actually, because that person has taken over so much of our public way, he was actually infringing on the other person because that's where it looked like the actual right-of-way was. But the reality is we need to shift it back, so we kind of need this to point it out. So the limits of that survey would be sort of the bottom of the houses there. And then I wanted to take it down and around through Beale Park because we kind of always had issues with that, and if they're there.
Joe Hammond's.
Yeah, around that, just to make sure we have that corner figured out, because I think that will really help in the future with the plowing and everything, and just in that area. Because we're gonna have to do something to keep allowing the snow to go off the side.
So we would end up with a survey that shows the limits of North Avenue straight down over the cliff. The little Beale
Yeah, it's
Walk,
called Beale
which
Walk,
has become a road.
Yeah.
and pull up in front of Eddington, would we go that
I
far?
think I was just thinking North Ave
In the
and
field.
Beal Walk.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we need a motion to
Well, is that
authorize.
the right limits? Do you think that?
Yeah, I
should-
think I'm wondering how we inspire the people who will benefit from having a fixed definition of where their boundaries are, participate in that cost. But that, and this motion authorizing this $5,000 is dependent upon that effort to get people to
Okay.
cooperate. And of course, a lot of people prefer not to know where the boundaries are because then they can trespass willy-nilly. So,
Billy and I could talk about that for about 2 hours.
Sort of. Where is this money going to come from?
yeah, that's what I don't know.
I mean, you've got $9,800 in contingencies. And that's the only source of revenue you have at this point in time. When does a survey need to be done? Could the survey be done in September, October?
Before they do their work.
Well, if you're going to put this work out to bid, you need to know where your property lines are. And if part of the scope of the work is going to be on someone else's property, you need to get those rights, even if it's a temporary construction easement.
So the date would be,
Well, so if this wants to be out to bid with the rest of the work,
Yes.
you want to be doing it now.
you want to be, yeah, it needs to be done by February.
Just a second, Vicki?
Do we know if any of those property owners have had their property surveyed?
When we wrote
Yes.
to them in terms of the fire pile, the firewood pile, we asked them to share, and no one's ever given us a
We're
survey.
we're
You
aware
said
of
yes?
we're aware of one survey in that area because there was a pin found.
Good deeds.
No, it was, the name's escaping me right now. But we communicated with that gentleman and he sent us his plan because
He's talking to residents, Good Deeds is another survey.
Well, I know who
Oh,
Good
yeah.
Deeds is, but there's a resident,
Dick Rockaway?
uh,
I figure, I don't, are they still around?
Miles, in the meantime.
I don't have the abutter names on here. I don't have it at my fingertips. But anyways, going down North Avenue on the right, not the property right in the corner, but one. That's who we had a survey of, but it was limited to that.
Just there, do you remember the surveyor you got it from?
That's what I'm.
Lane Gray did work
No.
there, and Liz Day?
No.
Okay,
Okay.
Miles?
Why can't that be a cost of this? Why can't that cost be included in this, not come out of contingency?
In this being the seawall project?
Yeah.
That's not the way the warrant was written.
No,
It does not
It doesn't
include.
include.
The voters didn't authorize it.
North Ave is a continuation of an authorization back in 2018 or 2018.
So I mean, I guess I can give you a couple different answers. You know, if you like betting on the come, you could spend the money in contingency, manage your budget very, very closely, and make sure you don't go over in other areas, and you'd be fine. You've got the $5,000 to spend. The second option, or an option that would be running parallel to that, is you could spend the $5,000 because you need to do it now. You do not currently have funding for the North Street project anyway, so you've got to go to the annual meeting to get that funding. So when you talk about bidding out North Street, I mean, that's fine, except that you have no authorization to do the work. You could go to the annual meeting and then ask for that money, and you could ask for it to be included in this project because you're below budget, in theory. You know, we have a limit of 1.6 million. You could say, look, we'd like to add in the additional funds to North Street at the same time. It's an incremental cost, and as long as voters approve it, you're in a great place. But if you're asking me, what do you have in your bank account, and what could you spend today, it's $9,800. And that's going to cover everything that happens that's different than what you expected this year.
I think it should come out of the roads budget, because that's what this really is. This is the roads, the end of the road improvement. Billy's
Yeah,
got.
and you could do that. It just kind of crimps you a little bit on your other road work.
We need to do this, right, Billy? I mean,
No, we've got to do something. I mean, it's been an ongoing problem for, what?
4 or 5 years. I like that idea.
right? I mean, I think that's the right way for it to come.
I like that too. I make a motion, we approved having the survey done with the monies from the road budget, and we will adjust appropriately with the road budget.
And you'll do,
Time to get this road done.
yeah, I guess we need a second on the discussion, right?
Second on that motion, to use road budget money to pay the $5,000 to Landmark to do the survey at the bottom of North Avenue.
Up to.
Up to 5,000.
Yeah, I mean,
Up to,
it's.
is there a second on that?
Somebody seconded it?
No.
I'm seconding it.
Judy. Discussion.
The only discussion question I have is, then what would you do? Do that as a add-on to the seawall? So, I understand you're bidding the whole thing at the same time, but you have no way to fund it today. But you do it,
We talked
you know,
about that.
for our purposes,
We're gonna do it as a separate line item, right?
It'll have to be a warrant
So it's
item.
that simple.
and you could opt not to do that if for some reason you couldn't get the funding.
It's a separate line item in the bid, it's not.
Right.
Right.
So
This
so
is
you're-
what's gonna happen, we're gonna get the survey, we're gonna share the survey with the abutters. The abutters are gonna say, no, I don't care, I don't agree with your survey, and we're gonna have a fight. So let's get the survey, and that will get us one step further down.
I'm just trying to make sure
Yeah.
in the bid process,
But I
doesn't
think,
create
yeah.
something.
Right, the warrant, you're absolutely right, we do need to have a warrant as to whether or not we're still arguing about what boundaries are. We will need to have a warrant article to authorize this piece of the puzzle to be done as part of that project, because we haven't authorized it all.
Right, and one thing that might happen is, I totally agree with you on the argument, because everybody thinks it's a little different. I think we might be able to determine enough from the survey to say that these are the limits of work, and then if we come into here, we're gonna be okay, and we can still fight about whether the survey is right or not later, but it's enough information that allows us to build it and be done with it.
Miles?
I'm just slightly confused. The North Street project will not go forward until after it's approved. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, none of this was gonna be constructed until after the next annual meeting anyway, so that, we always thought we could authorize that at this time.
And
At
the
that-
survey would not be fruitless if that's not approved. In other words, we're not spending money
No.
that's,
It won't be fruitless.
The
because
village has needed this for a long time.
This has been a 5 or 6 year conversation.
Even if we don't authorize it this year, eventually that's gonna fall in the ocean, and we're gonna have to do something.
The thing is, we're
So-
trying very hard to save those 2 houses,
And the bankment.
but they would prefer us to save them, but not say it's our land. That's what we're trying to do.
Vicki?
No, I was just going to say, that is why I said, let us move on. We've talked about this for years, along with the seawall. Now we're making some,
I just want to say, by the way, that sometimes in these discussions, we get into a freewheeling mode where people who want to be heard can't get heard because 2 or 3 people are going back and forth. So take a second before you need to speak the next time and raise your hand. It'll help. Thank you. We still have a motion to take $5,000 from the road budget and authorize it to up to $5,000 to pay Landmark to do a survey. And it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Michael? You too?
Aye.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
And that was out of the tree budget.
Anything else that involves our engineer team? Thank you so much for attending and all of your
thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you very much.
bye.
Anything else in the infrastructure committee?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
One more thing, and I'm just gonna lay it out there and we can talk about it in the future. It's one thing that came about as of the seawall work that was done at the end of Auditorium Park. I want to say 2 Auditorium Park. And they had put in a permit by rule. And the permit by rule is very, very minimal amount of information. And it lasts for a year, and we got notified as we always do. And the issue is that Billy kind of had to go and talk to them about how they were going to get the materials there and things, because we were kind of worried a little bit about it. And so he kind of had to go out and remember that it was happening and doing this. And we were, and then when they actually did the work, they came into Auditorium Park and shored up some of our land there. And while we don't have a problem with that, they did a good job. It still, we never knew that they were going to do that. And then now we have some people down on Shore Road that put in a permit by rule, and then the next door neighbor called Billy and was asking about it and so on. Where's their limit of work going to be and stuff? So one of the things that we were talking about, Billy and I, was we were thinking that although shoreland zoning is nothing that the village can have any say in. That doesn't mean that we couldn't have some sort of a notification system where essentially, if you put in a shoreline permit with 2P, then you fill out a little form and you send it to all your neighbors of what you're gonna do, and if they have any questions, they can contact you. And I would love to see that happen when they first put it in, and then, you know, like a month before construction, because people forget about stuff. And then it's just a neighborly thing, and then they can talk to each other about it. They can't affect any of their work and tell them not to do it, but it might get people to do some work together and help save the shore sort of synergistically, if we can, because there are a lot, if you look at the walls, there are a lot of places where people stopped 2 or 3 feet from the edge of their property, and then the next person started 2 or 3 feet in. And there's this little gully that keeps eroding out of that little space in between. So if we can get people to talk a little bit more about that, it might be helpful. So it's 100% notification, the village will be notified, the abutters, and we would leave it at that. Because right now, a lot of the permit by rules, we only find out about them if they ask us to use the boat ramp to get stuff down. We're not really in that loop at all. So, and we would tell too, we're not trying to influence the process or provide any opinions outside of the normal process. It would just be notification.
It's a good idea. I think it needs to be formalized in some way.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in the infrastructure committee over time, but I just wanted to put the idea. And if it's not a good idea, I don't want to.
No, I think it's a good idea because but I think it's a conversation about the power of communication. And therefore, I wonder if it's not a burden that we add to 2P, but rather a broadcast through our own communication efforts, Lisa, to remind people that the decisions that they're making will have an impact, and it would be a good idea to notify their neighbors.
Oh, so it could be, yeah, maybe it should be by the communication committee, actually.
You know, you take the contrast that we have when Sid and Martha wanted to do theirs, they brought the whole community into that, and that saved them all money, because it was one, so there was one continuous wall there, built by Alice and Ginny and Charlene and Sid.
Right.
And that was smart.
Right.
Down the South Shore, you have different personalities, different types of communication, different wars.
And they were all done at different times, so they all need repairs at different
So
times.
basically, my getting this clear, just make a recommendation that we then send out to people. So is that something that you could word for me,
Yeah.
and I'll send it out
Yeah,
to you?
we can talk about it.
Yeah, and I don't think, I don't want to have I'm not going to suggest that 2P would not be cooperative. It's just one more thing for her to do, and there's no legal basis for her to do that. So if we can do it within our own efforts, then it's not a burden.
I believe if we passed a resolution that said if she gets a permit, she has to give it to us, why wouldn't she have to?
Because we can't direct 2P what to do. The selectmen, I mean, a town liaison can say, we're having this issue, what ideas do you have? Would you direct 2P to let us know, and we'll take it from there. But
Vicki?
And then we come with enforcement. So it's silly to have a rule if there's no enforcement. It just becomes a bunch of busy work. So perhaps this needs a little bit of thought.
Well, it's not, there's no enforcement, all it is notification.
Right, but when
Tell me I
someone,
have to know.
then next time, when someone doesn't do it, then you get irritated, and the question is, so what level does it move to? And by keeping it within the community, you can deal with that better, I think, than having a township.
Okay. All right, you do that. I'll talk to you about it.
Okay.
Anything else in the infrastructure?
No, I think that, I do have other topics, but we're going to talk about them next month.
Excellent. Tree Committee, Lisa Pryor.
Yep, not too much information. John and Hoya and I have been talking about grants. There's a possibility under tree canopy, there's 2 different grants, one for planting, obviously we'll hopefully get one for trees, and there's also under planning something about invasive pests. We're going to go to a web thing, find out if perhaps we could get money for the brown-tailed moth. Not promising anything, we're going to talk with them. We'll go to the seminar and see what there might be available and if we're allowed to use that for that.
So this is actually the opportunity then to talk about the Diana Eastie letter, which was co-signed by about a dozen people, which was asking the overseers to take some form of action regarding brown-tailed moths.
And we brought it up before, we had
Right.
said there was no money.
Right.
So we can talk about that again, and, yeah. talk about it again.
Farm tells off. So she also sent the letter to me, I sent it out to everybody, I hope everybody had a chance to look at it, it was very, very well done. I contacted a couple of the tree people, but I received it on Friday, they haven't gotten back to me as far as cost. What I have read is from the other links that she had, but I've seen some of them before, some of it was new, was that you can spray. There are restrictions if you're close to the water. You have to be, I think, 250 feet back. You can inject. Last year when we were talking about injection, it was new. There was only one guy in the area that was doing it, and the cost was $100 per injection, and depends on the size of the tree as to how many injections the tree needs. And then you can cut them out. And so I'm going to start here. I did print these off. These were sent by, I don't know how did I get these? There's two pieces for each. So just take two and pass them on. It talks about how you cut them out and that they should be cut out before April, which may be what Diane is talking about. But I have to say, when I got this and I was walking around yesterday looking at the trees, I am not seeing nests. And so if anybody sees a nest, I'd like to know where it is. I'm going to walk around a bit more. I know there were nests over in Bayview Park last year in the smaller bushes that were readily visible. I know that Suzanne Rico was severely affected last year with the brown tail moth, so I was going to get in touch with her and go down and look around their trees to see exactly where they are right now. And as far as the grant, you know, the Emerald Ash Borer is coming, so let us not spend our tree dollars without that, because in the big picture, at least right now, the Emerald Ash Borer is the bigger pest as far as losing trees. And I say that anecdotally, I am not a tree person. I do know that the tree person we use here is willing to cut out nests, but he won't bring any special equipment to get up high. And my guess is that some of these other people might be the same, but again, next month, or hopefully by February 2nd, in 2 weeks or whatever it is, I'll have something from them and I can give you a better idea of what the cost might be.
I will note that the tree warden said, I am not a tree person.
No, okay. Don't be touching my tree.
Anything else from either of you?
This is very helpful.
There's
That is very helpful.
There's part of that letter we haven't talked about, which is they recognize the village has no funds and ask for permission to do fundraising. And historically, a bunch of things we do with community hall windows, the overseers say, sure, if you guys want to raise funds, that's fine. We set up an account on the books here. People send the money in, it's tax deductible. It can be refunded to them if the decision is made not to go forward. So if people come in here and look around and say there's really no point in doing the work that you're asking, then we move on. If they come back and say we can do the work and it's $100,000, then we probably move on.
Yeah, so how about we, you tell me if you think this is reasonable, we get prices, we find out the information, and if this is something that seems like it could be doable, the tree committee will take it upon themselves to start a fundraising little campaign, and we'll see what we can do.
Well, I don't even know if the tree committee needs to do that.
I think
Diana.
Diane is
I
all.
don't think it's responsibility of the people who are asking for this support.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Well, this has been an issue that's come up at this board several times in the past year or two, so I don't think it hurts for us to research and get some sense of what the financing would be. Mike?
Has the tree committee looked at like how many there are out there that we would want to take down? Like, is there one, is there 5,000, is there?
Well, that's
Trees? You mean trees, infested trees?
No, the little ones
Nests?
that you're gonna cut out.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I don't see any. I'm looking.
They look like a dry leaf.
I know what they look
often.
like.
They're not the
you
tent
don't see
caterpillars.
anything.
I don't see any, I don't see any.
Okay.
They're there.
Okay,
somewhere.
but yeah,
I-
I haven't looked everywhere.
I think
Have you seen
that,
any?
No,
sorry.
go ahead.
Judy?
I think that Diana and the people who signed the letter are taking a very proactive approach to something that is likely to be bothersome to us again. And to the extent that they're willing to put their own money where their mouth is and to ask others. And I'm grateful for that. We don't yet know how that would be expended, but I would encourage them to work with the treasurer to set up a separate account. and they will get a tax letter, because any contributions for a designated purpose within the village is tax deductible, to the extent that it is already.
And
Okay.
Steve, you can set something up where like, we decide they're earning enough to do this year, but they're looking down the road, we can just save the money in the account, right? The earmarked portion?
You could do that, but we also, because of the way we work at float reserves, we just have to say this money was donated.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because at the end of the year.
You could work around that.
You could.
But they're looking at doing it this year if they can.
Okay.
So what you're gonna end up having is a problem with brown-tailed moths and caterpillars and all this other stuff this year, which for the people who are affected, I guess are affected pretty significantly. Don't bother me at all. But I know there are a bunch of people running around here who have pretty rotten summers.
Oh, I have,
You know, and the other issue is that long-term, this is not gonna go away. This has been going on in southern Maine for some time, just grappling with the same sorts of things and trying to decide whether to spray, cut nests out, and everything else. So, I think you'll probably hear from people going down the road, a question about what are we gonna do with it long-term. And there could be recommendations that we dedicate funds in the budget to try to do something, if in fact that's at all practical. I mean, no one has answers to any of these things.
No.
But as opposed to saying, let's just wait a year and see what we can do, is there anything we can do this year?
Right, because if we do it, Northport doesn't do it, is it just futile?
It's a localized kind of
Right.
thing. So if there are trees up at the alpaca experience, they're not gonna affect us. Those caterpillars may move this way, but if you clear them out in the area you're in, then the infestation changes.
Oh, the attack of the little,
Yeah,
the
the
hairs.
little hairs.
Yeah.
Vicky?
I do not believe in any lifetime that I live in that Northport's going to be doing anything about the brown-tailed moth. This is a village concern. So I would suggest that, yes, as a board, we give our approval to starting a community fund for this specific purpose, of which nothing will be done. We will work together with the committee and the tree committee and the tree warden to decide what we can do to treat these trees and try to combat it, but certainly go ahead and we can start the fundraising with it.
I don't think there's any harm in doing that.
Absolutely not.
It may just be
Absolutely not.
refunded to people.
Absolutely not. And again, none of these three things to fix it, I'm using the words, the spraying is not guaranteed, okay? And they're unsure of the effectiveness. They are unsure of the effectiveness of the injections. The tried and true is the clipping of the nests. Yeah, I have seen no reason to not do that if that is if that makes them feel comfortable at this point. Now, I have more on the tree thing.
I don't feel like we've understood exactly what's happening here. Is someone responding to Diana Eastie?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Do you want to respond, or I can respond and say we're going to start the process, we can set up the fundraising, we're gathering information about the costs and the different liabilities, and we'll be working with them. Okay?
You can set up.
Yeah.
You to Diane, you say you
Yeah,
can set up.
I'll communicate with
I
her.
will teach you
and-
how to fish.
No, I'm sure Diane Eastie knows how to fish.
Yeah,
Okay.
so would you like me to I'll contact
Yeah,
her and you get the pricing?
yeah,
and we'll
I'll do
communicate
I'll do
with-
the tree
Thank
kids.
you.
Yeah, we got a deal.
Now,
Oh,
Vicky, you said you had other things.
I do. I'm just sitting here writing lovely little notes to myself. Okay, so one emergency, I don't know if some were aware, some are not. There was a tree on George Street right behind where Mary Hanrahan's tiny house is that was leaning very dangerously over a wire. She alerted Bill to it. Our arborist came in and took that down in 2 steps, but was really, really nicely responsive and said it was a really good idea because that tree was ready to go. It was all hollow and it was right before a storm. I mean, timing couldn't have been better. So working together was good. That was to the tune of $1,525. Somebody came by, asked if they could have the wood. He said, sure. He cut it up. They stacked it by the road. He put 2 little orange cones out there so trappic wouldn't run over it. They took, the wood has disappeared. I don't know where it went. So that all worked out.
Was that tree on town land or Mary's land?
Town land, it was town land.
Village land.
Behind
So a new tree is going to go up at some point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, soon as we get this brown tunnel thing. It's in the book. I got them, all the trees were taken down, I got them in the book. We know how, yeah.
That was the question I was gonna ask, what are we at now, 20?
No
We're
problem.
gonna buy one big tree with that.
Well, there was no record before I started, but now we have a record. Okay, so the other is, our arborist came around, we made a list for this year. Some of these things were on last year's, but they weren't priorities, but we don't have any priorities now. So Blaisdell Park is gonna be pruned and trimmed, and auditorium, at the end of Auditorium Park, where the ramp is going down, the people at the corner there on that, they're afraid those branches are gonna fall on somebody. So he will prune that tree, that area down there, and then there's still the tree on West Street. Both Auditorium Park and West Street aren't plowed, just gotta wait till there's no snow. There was a bunch of lost stuff. So I think a meeting or so ago, I said, well, how about the tree committee and the tree warden and stuff sort of, help Bill with some of these landscaping issues. So one of the landscaping issues that came up were the trees across from the water pump at Merrithew Square. There's a fence there that Bill just recently informed me the museum, historical society was thinking about redoing. We had complaints from the people across the road because the trees that were by the mailboxes were blocking their view. Well, I thought they were hedges. Anyway, so we said, well, trim them down. And then it was, well, then they'll just grow back up. We'll trim them down a little further. So they trimmed them down. It's not appropriate. It's a mess. Here's pictures. If you haven't walked by there, my apologies. It was some lack of communication and.
Kind of grow back.
Well, actually, they won't. So I talked to our arborist, and we think the best. I'm into a low maintenance kind of landscaping. Okay, we already took out a bunch of bushes over in Bayview Park that was blocking somebody's light in their view and whatever, because every time it was several $100s. I would be in favor of removing these trees and stumps and then planting there, or the people that live there can plant there as they see fit. So
It's gonna make you cry then.
yeah. So anyway, I spoke to our arborist for less than $2,000. He can take out the rest. You can't take out all the root systems because the root system is pretty extensive. But cut down what's left of these trees and grind up the stumps a bit. We can use the chips as compost like. That's that. Is there
Any
anything you want to
questions
do
for-
about that, or any?
Well, you have a budget, I don't know if
Who's
it's.
the person who cut them that low?
I think we had Basil, right?
We did it?
Yeah, we did it.
It was a communications, when it was brought to me, I said, that's kind of too low, and then
Well, they said that was kind of too
And
low.
then they come and they said, yeah, man, that's kind of too low, and then I went back around the issue, we waited months, I think, or a few months.
Obviously, these have some significance.
And I went back around, and then it was like, well, we gotta get it done, so get it done, and that's what we got.
I'd like to hear from Ned.
So I think the reason Judy was looking at me is because it was my uncle, Lawrence, many years ago, who was into dwarf conifers. And when he planted those, they were more like slow-growing conifers. I don't think he ever envisioned them becoming large and huge and becoming an impediment to the view. I can't speak for my long-deceased uncle, but I can say that he would probably want these ripped out rather than looking like this. He had the best of intentions to make a beautiful low hedge using this variety of conifers. So if you want, and I can't even speak for all the Leitner family, but I know that I kind of knew my Uncle Lawrence's sense of aesthetics, and I know that this would not be, I think he would feel much better starting from scratch or doing something rather than having this.
Right, and I want to say, I'm unaware of some of the history here, and the other is I'm slowly with this whole issue of landscaping and trees, or trees, which is known, is that a lot of things haven't been appropriately tended, where then it would be manageable, and I take full responsibility for this, and we can put a dwarf tree there in honor of your uncle.
I believe that it had always been, as so often happens, people like like Bob Abersold, who's also now deceased, took it upon himself to try. It was almost like a family effort, but as people have gotten older and died, that's what happened. So it's not, I don't think any of us would hold the village responsible for allowing him to go out of control. I think everybody had the best of intentions. My uncle certainly was into beautifying and not, becoming having a bunch of nuisance hedges that obstruct the views of his neighbors. So.
Well, I have to say, I was surprised to even learn that they belonged to that it was on village property, and hopefully, if this gives everybody some peace, again, I say it's a matter of getting this in a format where it can be passed to the next group, and they can make an educated decision as to whether or not they want to continue with some of these things. But thank you.
Judy?
So can we get a cost what it would take to remove the stumps? Because much like the Roundtown Moths, I think there are people in the family who would do that, and then maybe the family could do a plan to bring to the village for a new type of planting.
Well, that's what Mr. Lerman gave me, was approximately 2,400, and I think that was high. It was, anyway, I just said I needed something to take to the overseers. There's 14 stumps. They would remove the trees down to the ground and then grind up the stumps, and then we could berm it up with soil, some sort of topsoil.
2,400?
They wouldn't do the berming, but they would get rid of the stumps. So as far as, you can't get much more than that because of the root system.
Okay.
But and the other thing, I assume that the stumps would be a lot because he mentioned the wood chips and whether to leave them or not. And I think, a little compost is always good. So if that is okay with everybody, that is the way we'll proceed.
Is there money to do that?
Yes.
You have a budget?
It'll be, yeah. It'll be fine.
She's got $8,500.
It'll be $8,500.
Question was, do you have a budget?
Yeah.
You have $8,500.
Oh, yeah, I thought you said I had 500 or something. Yeah, I got 800, yeah, we have a budget. Let's tell everybody how much money we have. Might go little wonders. Yes, and the other, my other thing was I would like to get it done in the spring, so it's attractive and hopefully the fence can be fixed in a timely fashion.
And the historical society is fixing the fence, right?
That's what Billy said. That's the first I'd ever heard of
I
it.
think Rob Sherman.
Rob Sherman
89 years old.
has spearheaded something there, and I believe that he finally got an answer from the Historical Society that they may purchase the fence part itself. But he's going to do the work that's involved.
Can I make one more?
Go right ahead.
This is not trees, but I did take this on. This is old business. We phones. So we got a phone. We got the one that Jeffrey Wilt suggested for $999.96. Unbeknownst to us, there are digital phones for those big places in the city and thing. And then there are analog. We are analog, and that's a good thing because I sent the digital one back and we got an analog one for like $434.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your
Anyway,
patience.
so, and it seems to work well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used it on last Saturday.
Do we have a
There was no
receipt
ruffling
from
of
this
papers
one?
then.
Isn't that on there?
This is just the original one.
I got everything, it's not gonna be.
Anything else?
Beautiful, thank you.
Vicki?
No, I'm finished, thank you very much.
Legal communications?
No new information?
Finance, Judy Metcalf?
No new information.
Judy Metcalf, governance?
The governance committee, the parking, the people reviewing the parking ordinance have met twice since our last meeting. We are very close to completing a redraft of the ordinance, and we meet again on February 1st at 8:30 here in this office. There's also call-in information. So I think that by March, we'll have a draft ready for public hearings and comment. We are also pursuing alternative locations, satellite parking with the school department, and we're looking closely at Cradle Row.
Yep.
Any
Should
other
have a
big,
draft
any
of
other
public
big
comment.
changes or anything, I mean, that you see or that you put in those ordinances that you need a heads up on?
I think I think the changes are that we are clarifying the no parking areas. I don't perceive that we are creating new no parking areas that will cause drama. You'd be surprised that there are lots of no parking areas already that are parked in. So we will be also clarifying the enforcement potential. The meetings we had a couple meetings ago was with the substantial benefit of commentary from Michael Boucher to work in the proper laws.
Are you looking at overnight parking and parking during the day separately? Okay.
Not separately, at the same time. We're looking at everything.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
But you might have different rules for overnight parking.
yes. And to review the committee members, the people working hard on that are Elaine Moss, Gina Cressy, Deanna Wolfire, Sandy Hall, Jeffrey, me, Dan Webster. And Martha Beezer, who is really working well at the school for us.
Anything else from the governance committee?
I know.
Personnel committee, it says Judy here, is that correct? I think it's Jeffrey, right?
Yeah, crossed out.
Jeffrey's on every committee, have you noticed that?
Apparently, yeah. The Personnel Committee has met 3 times since our last meeting. The chairman missed one of them. He's been forgiven, I think. At our last meeting, we had
I think that's when he was elected the chairman.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened. Action items that came out of our last meeting was, there was some discussion about the treasurer position, as we know. Steve has notified us that he will not continue as treasurer after the annual meeting, right? Give or take. 2 or 3 years.
You're 3 years. An optimistic heart.
2 or 3 years.
So we're going through the process of reviewing the job description and really looking at it from, Steve as treasurer, the treasurer's position is kind of a hybrid position because Steve has taken on more responsibility that isn't traditionally done by a treasurer. Our view is in the post-Steve era, the treasurer will play a more traditional role and not do as many of the finance management tasks that Steve now does. So we are looking at a job description for a more traditional treasurer's role, and Steve's working on that. We've contacted Blair to ask him to develop a list of candidates for the next treasurer. We've also talked about the finance manager position. We had a finance manager position. We haven't for the last couple of years. We're looking at do we need to bring that position back, or are there different ways to do it? We're looking at a job description. We also have been investigating outsourcing options, and Judy and Miles talked to an individual who can help us with that, and Mike originally talked to this individual, and Steve and I will do a follow-up interview with her, but that looks promising. In terms of the office manager position, we're reviewing the job description as a committee. We're also investigating outsourcing options for that position and really looking at what should that position look like going forward. And we have some ideas on that. We've advertised, we've posted the position on jobsofmaine.com, Bayside, Maine. We've had some.
We've had one.
We've had one, and we've two, actually, because someone's been in
that
contact with me.
individual finally applied through the correct channel.
So more to come on that. In future meetings, we're going to really start to look at the immediate, mid, and long-term structure for the village corporation, and we really would love to have an org chart. Because so often, and I know this has happened to me, I think about us having fewer employees than we actually do when you start to look at the utility and safety and things like that. There are more moving parts than I think sometimes we
Double
realize.
digits.
It is double digits. We're also going to take on a discussion around succession planning for all of our positions to make sure that we actually have a process. Should things happen, there's a succession process. And then finally, we've asked the safety committee to review the lifeguard needs at their upcoming meetings, which I'm sure we'll get to. And our next meeting, for anyone who is interested, is February 1st, 10:30, here or by telephone.
And that is a beautiful, broad view of things that need to be put into place and have protocols for. I was under the impression, given our last experience with the office manager, that the real blip in the process was that we didn't have a personnel manual that spelled out what expectations are of a person when they work here, what our policy was for, at this point in life, things like medical marijuana on the job, what our policy is about for showing up late, what our policy is for not showing up at all, what our policy is for sick leave. We need a personnel manual for all of these people. Is that in your plan?
It will be, yes, and thank you for that. That's an excellent point, so we'll add that into the, and again, I don't think we have to invent the wheel here. I mean, I think
No, and
there
it
are
doesn't
personal
have to be,
manuals
it
that
has-
exist that we can bring and modify for our needs.
I was really surprised that we were advertising for an office manager in the dead of winter when we were trying to work on these job descriptions and things. Because I think we need to think a little bit more outside the box of the way we've been doing things before. And if I can just finish, I just feel like the office manager position seems to be really, really necessary for more than a day or two in the winter, a lot more in the summer. And I'm just wondering if we can think outside the box with sort of summer interns, helping with that, and then maybe we have volunteers in the winter, one day, just to help sort of get the thing over the edge of being open. I mean, I'd be here one day, sit here and take checks to do it, and it seems like because of the job description for that, it doesn't seem like it's something that we really need to have somebody doing directly until we get all the things together in place of how everything fits together first. Because I don't think we have the right job description, because I don't know what it is, but I know it's not exactly what we did before. I just don't know what it is.
Well, it is exactly what we did before, man.
Judy?
That was Amy's job description.
Judy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had that conversation when we decided to authorize posting. And I think that we had a lot of conversations about the perfect description. And then it was either me or Miles who said, we're spending a lot of time talking about what we want. Part of that has to be what's out there. And we have to figure out who can bring something to us. We didn't get the benefit. We need to get the benefit of what can we get. We also were very sensitive to the fact that we're stressing three very important parts here. We're stressing Steve, and therefore our budget,
Right,
and we're stressing Billy,
right.
and therefore our budget, so 4 parts. So we need to figure out how to get the coverage that we used to have.
Well,
This is a part of the process of figuring out what we need by advertising and seeing what we can get.
because by sorry,
Go ahead.
by advertising and seeing what we can get doesn't mean we have to hire someone. So the idea was to, on a parallel track,
Okay.
look at what the market has to offer from the standpoint of a traditional employee,
Gotcha.
and look at outsourcing options, a la Nina and some other things like that. So we did not want to be in a process where we followed one trail at a time. The idea was to sort of, to do it on parallel tracks to see what our options are. So this is really just getting a sense of what our options are.
Okay,
That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to hire the people who are applying.
yeah, okay.
We could refashion the description if we're not satisfied with who
Yeah.
applies
No,
or
I
if nobody
think-
applies.
So the point is if we found the perfect Amy Part 2, right?
Yeah,
We would probably hire her.
right.
But then, if that's not what the ultimate description needed to be, that's where I get a little worried, is if that's not really what we want. I don't know.
I think it is important for us to understand what the market is out there. And this exercise allows us to do that as we modify what the job might be.
Vicki?
Well, I would say, I was surprised to see the ad, you sent it out to show us that you had done this, because I thought we were still in the conversation as to whether or not we needed somebody or we were going to do the outsourcing. So thank you for that explanation. That explains that. I just want to encourage you that you know, this is a small area. You are not going to find, maybe another perfect Amy. What you're going to maybe perhaps strive for and hopefully find is somebody that can be trained appropriately with the appropriate checks and balances in there, such as, you get like a 3-month trial period before you totally destroy our bookkeeping system, and that sort of thing. It is not going to be traditional, and I will say, when I first came here, I took a job up in, I can't remember the name of the place, but way western Maine, Pasco, Egan and stuff. And it was very funny because, again, small job pool, and we're looking for dental assistants, You can train people to be dental assistants, but not everybody can be a dental assistant, and they found that the best dental assistant person to train was somebody who'd been a waitress, because they could think on their feet and they could multitask, and it worked like a charm. And so again, just that's my limited little world experience, but there are people out there. It's a good job we offer.
Well, and that's part of the conversation that Jeffrey has mentioned. We had a conversation with a local bookkeeper who does work for different size organizations, so that we can get ideas from her about what she sees from the outside would work better in rejiggering. Do we bring someone in, to do bookkeeping? Do we in-house? Do we do this new Portland, new/old Portland, calmed everything down demonstrably, so we don't really have the urgency we had in October? We're continuing that conversation. We've got some. I was very encouraged by the conversation we had on Friday, because that was a person who could say, this is what you might need, this might make things work better. And, she wasn't saying, and hire me, please. She was saying, that might work.
Right, and we have to be cognizant, obviously, of changing stuff now, we don't want to change Steve's stuff too much, because he's already got it all set. We want him to do it the way he's been doing it until he transitions. So that's why I was surprised at the ad came out, because it seemed like they were jumping it a little. But that's okay.
Any other questions for the Personnel Committee? Thank you. Utility, Judy.
Utility Committee met on Friday, and we have 2 action items. I hope you all opened your email Friday night from Dick McElhaney, because they are the draft budgets that we need you to approve. They're the budget for the water department is an easy one.
Yes.
It doesn't have any real drama, any real changes off
Let's
of,
start with that one.
off of what our traditional budget is. There is on personnel, there's a cushion there to anticipate some wage adjustments for our very hard workers. I would look for a motion to approve the water budget. I hope that you all looked at it and opened it.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, any questions?
Further discussion on that budget? Hearing none, all in favor of the approving the water budget? It's unanimous, thank you.
Sewer budget is a bigger challenge. I hope you all open to that. Let's get straight to the pain. And I'm very glad that our utilities trustees are here so that I don't have to thank you, Gordon, for being here. Because everyone's sewer bill is going to go up based on this budget, $55 a trimester. It's $165 a year. That's an additional $40,000 of collected income because we have no less than an additional $40,000 of cost, which arises from the extraordinary cost of annual chemicals as opposed to 6 months of chemicals, and annual testing as opposed to 6 months of employees doing that testing. That
And expanded testing.
right. So we're doing this every day. The personnel costs and the chemicals in the ground are going to cost that much more. We did everything we could to make it bare bones. And so one thing that we did to make it bare bones was traditionally the utilities contribute to rent, which they pay to the village. The village has budgeted and expects rent of $3,000 per utility to buttress the village budget. We cut out of the sewer budget the $3,000 rent for this year.
We just approved the 3,000 for water.
Right, we did approve the 3,000 for water. That's what you all just approved. But the budget that we are asking you to approve increases everyone's sewer bill annually $165 a year and decreases, I know, but talk to the EPA.
No, I get it.
And therefore, for this year at least, we are saying we're not going to pay the village $3,000 in taxes, in rent, which is in this, so that's a hit to the general budget. And with those two really hard pieces of news, I would love a motion to approve that.
Well, okay, we can discussion.
Is there a motion to approve the sewer budget as proposed? Lisa, and is there a second to that?
Second.
Vicki, now is there discussion?
Yeah, well, okay, I know you're probably going to get into that, but I wanted you to add one more thing first. We were going to talk a little bit about the building portion and how that affects this budget or not, and that we're taking money out of reserves and...
Right. When we talk to the taxpayers about the new building, we're paying that all with reserves. We've anticipated that the cost of that building will be about $200,000. We have enough reserves that if there is some growth in the construction bid, we have about $240,000 in reserves. You might want to double check that.
238.
We 238 because we paid 40,000 or so out. So we have a cushion for the building, but obviously those reserves we did look at. Well, this $40,000 increase on users' fees, can we take some money from reserves to serve as that stream of income? And what we concluded on Friday was we brought our cushion from 240 down to 40.
Right.
And we just didn't feel that we could dig into that in order to offset what we're asking the users to pay, which is the $55 a trimester. So we did look at it.
We did look at it.
Steve?
Yeah, so food for thought. One of the things that we've discussed for 10 years, 12 years, is the fact that the village should not bear cost of utility operations. So by eliminating the rent, what you do is you force the people who are not on the sewer system to bear additional costs. True? So just food for thought, right?
Yeah.
So it's inconsistent, or not so much inconsistent, it is the approach the overseers have chosen to take in past years. The second piece is, if I were an overseer and you asked me to vote on this, I would say, not this year, but if you want to raise that as a change in the budget for the following year, that would be a good thing to do. Because the impact to general government right now is you have a $9,800 contingency that will now drop by $3,000. That we had no idea this was coming, it wasn't expected, it was never communicated, and I don't think that's appropriate. So I'm just, again, food for thought for you guys to think about. It's not my decision. I just want you to understand the financial impacts of the decision you're being asked to make.
So if the $3,000 that traditionally comes in rent, if that was funded out of, I mean, if we funded that, is the utilities funded that with, I guess what I'm trying to say, can you make the $165 per year increase to the villages, 168, and get to the same place?
We could.
Once, it would be,
Yes, 224 users, you'd be
yeah,
adding back in.
we did this the other day.
Yeah.
It would be another $10 probably.
Yeah.
Let's just say $10.
15.
Okay.
Judy?
Well, to respond specifically to the offloading utility expenses onto villagers, some of whom are not sewer users, there's two responses I have to that. The operation of this organization is shared, the utilities of this building, the phones, Billy, they are all spread out among the three entities. So this $3,000 number, we're already paying the expenses of the organization in some way, in any event. I also remind you all that for many, many, many years, the village funded a reimbursement to the sewer department for $15,000 in recognition that the sewer users were providing an extraordinary benefit to the villagers, some of whom are not sewer users, by cleaning the bay with our really good sewer system. It went down to $10,000, then it went down to $5,000, and now that $5,000 contribution that was always part of the annual budget for the village is no longer there. There's no contribution by the people who benefit from that sewer system who do not use the sewer system. So it's a potato-potato argument. I have absolute respect for, it's a surprising argument. We did approve a budget in August for the villagers, which anticipated $3,000 from the sewer system. When we looked at the impact we were making on the 224 sewer users and saw $55 times 3, that was a hard one for all of us to approve, and that's why we said, well, this 3,000, this is kind of a money in, money out number. Maybe we get rid of that one.
And one of the other things was, we looked at that as also sort of some contingencies for what's happening right now. We have this big startup. We don't really know what's going to happen with the expenses related to running the building and other things. We don't even have, we're going to find out what those are. We won't know those till the end of the year. So we are hopeful that if the expenses are more in line with what we think, this could be a one-year thing. It's just, the idea was this year while we're doing this construction, we don't want to raise the sewer stuff so much to cover that, and then, so we thought that we would do this year and revisit it, right? Didn't we say that? It wasn't for forever. That's why we didn't do the water one. We left the water one alone. This was just because of the sewer project.
But to Steve's point, it impacts a budget that's already been approved and that we're already in. So it creates a permanent variance in the budget.
I can also understand the desire not to pull from reserves long term. So you pull 3,000 one time as opposed to saying we're going to suck this up for a long time on your reserves. I mean, it's an expense to the business. The other thing you're doing is transferring that same cost you don't want to add to your sewer bill to the taxpayers of the village. And to the extent that I'm on the sewer system, you're making me feel good about my sewer bill, and you're essentially going to raise my tax bill. Because you're going to have to increase the tax revenue for next year by $3,000 to cover the $3,000 you're no longer supplying, right? So you need to understand, I mean, you can talk about this all you want to, it's all interrelated for sure. And I'm not necessarily opposed to having that reduction. I think it's a poor decision for this fiscal year when we're in the midst of trying to do things with a $1.6 million seawall. I think that if you lived in Portland, Maine, you'd not be having this discussion because the sewerage and water is completely independent of government and they have to stand on their own 2 feet. So I could go on for hours, but those are just things to think about.
Miles?
The other variable is that it looks as if we can probably figure a way to lower the water budget, in which case water may go down, which is an offset for the people that are paying both water and sewer.
$55?
No, 165.
Wait, before Jeffrey?
Well, but are we not, I mean, the cost of being a sewer subscriber is what it is. So are we just postponing the additional $3,000 of paying until sometime in the future? I mean, I don't like the idea of spending $165 a year more for my sewer truck, but it is what it is. I mean, thank you, EPA.
Judy?
I can honestly say that we did not look at the idea of pulling 3,000 from reserves. We looked at how we wouldn't take 240,000 from reserves, the additional 40. So that's something we didn't consider. I think it's correct that we're pulling the 3,000 out and the village was counting on it, but then what always happens is then the sewer is always, when we're looking at the budget, we always say, well, we're stuck with this 3,000. So there's a preordained expense for us without us having approved that expense too. It goes both ways. The 165 is, we have to pay it because we have to have a sewer system. We don't have an alternative. But I'm willing to consider bringing back to the trustees a modification of the budget to keep the rental in there, but take 3,000 of the 40,000 that we'll have left from reserves. That brings the reserves down to only 37. I thought 40 was a floor that I really wasn't willing to go under.
But, and
Mike?
I'll ask Gordon this too, but I thought at the utilities meeting that $3,000 was also sort of to make sure contingency-wise we were going to draw on this. We were looking at how much contingency we were going to have to do this project. It's not like we cannot do it. So we had talked about it being this year that we were going to take this 3, and then we were going to revisit next year. And, in theory, we joked about the 3 for water going away, but it was also that it could go back in. So I looked at it as this was a $3,000 budget item that needed to take place because of if you look at the overall budget for sewer, this construction project that the sewer group is taking on is a significant portion of that budget. So we just needed that contingency for this year was kind of the way I looked at it. Did you look at it that way, or was it not? Did I not get that correct? Or?
Well, I never really understood the rental component of this thing, first of all, but yeah, that's generally. But we didn't talk about pulling it from reserves.
We didn't talk about.
No, we didn't do that yet.
Bother me as a trustee if that's what we wanted to do.
There is an open motion on the floor to accept this budget as it's currently being proposed, which would remove the $3,000 component, the rent. Do people want to vote on that, or do you want to withdraw that and do some investigating, or among trustees? I don't know what.
I would ask the non-utility trustees to give us guidance.
Well, I just want to touch base on one other piece. The utilities trustees who were overseers at the time the rental was put in place approved it. So it is not something that the utilities didn't know about or didn't see coming.
Say that again.
I understand what you're saying. He's saying, well, you know full well about you said.
And it was approved by the overseers, the utility trustees at the point in time it was
Right.
approved.
But there's no doubt that decisions that we make, we hopefully are informed as to them. But it's only when we look at a budget that puts stark paper in front of us showing that we have to increase our users' fees by $165 that we try to find a balance. And the balance we struck on Friday was this $3,000 doesn't take away from the village's ability to pay for the lights, the phone, the building, Billy, the office manager. Let's take this $3,000 out.
Vicki?
Will you be having a utilities meeting before February 2nd?
No.
Not before, no, we could, we could.
Well, I would say, we can't vote on this unless we know that they're willing to take the money out of their general fund. So I guess we vote for what's on the table. If it's going to pass or fail, let it do that. If it fails, then you see if the stickler is the $3,000 rent, then your task would be to get it okay from utilities. You can't vote on it if we don't have it.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Sure.
If this budget isn't approved, what does that mean to the utilities
It
committee?
means we get a budget approved in February.
It doesn't, so it's not that big a deal, is that
Right.
right?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to continue operating.
Yeah, that's right,
You
we
know,
still have to do it.
Yeah, do
We
it.
still have to go take the
Yeah,
samples
we
and inspect
spent
them.
30 minutes talking.
Right, so
Right.
why don't we just, and I would say,
Well, we got a motion on the table, we got to do something.
So you
There's a
can
motion.
table the motion, or you can withdraw the motion, and the trustees can bring it back to.
Or vote.
Me, I'll withdraw the motion.
is that okay?
Fine.
And you'll find out if they're willing to take the 3,000 rent out.
Yeah, we've got 4 of them sitting right here, so.
And I think whenever
Is that
a decision has been made, we need to send something out for communication so
Yeah.
people are aware and that we don't have huge
Well, the budget,
people coming to Billy
Well, that's-
up in arms, right?
the raise is coming in March, right?
Will that be
Well, only if the
reflected?
budget's approved.
But it would be reflected in the March?
It'll be in your next utility bill. Your bill next month, your next bill for the sewer system will not be $183. It'll be $55 more than that, at least, if we don't take 3 from reserves.
So there's a communication.
Yeah, and the utility trustees committed to
We
making that.
can't take it from reserves this year, we just can't. We need the money there because we need the contingency for the construction, that's what I'm saying, so. We'll have to, it's gonna be more than the 55 is the only way it's gonna work, but that's fine. If that's what we wanna do, we can go back and talk about it again.
But I'm waiting to communicate until after next month,
Right.
correct?
And,
Okay.
and the trustees made a specific commitment that we wouldn't put that war on your shoulders. We would-
Steve?
So the other thought I ask you guys to consider, so Jeff raised the point of, so we're talking $10. You know, it's the difference between 155 and 165. It's material, but it's nothing at the same
That's
time.
60, that's what I said.
Okay, so if you were to go to the higher rate, because I say I would never support eliminating rental for this year. It's in the general government budget, it creates a whole bunch of other spin-offs. Eliminate it for the 2021 budget. But now that you've raised those rates, you put $3,000 back in the sewer reserves that you're not going to. Because my bet is when you look at your sewer reserve budget, you have no plans to put anything in the budget. All you're doing now is pulling money out.
We have the 7,200 that we have to put in every year for the RD funding, but you're right, we don't have any
And which you can
contingency.
use.
Right.
So, I mean, but it will give you, it also gives you the ability to start rebuilding that. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that the expense is what it is. But the $10 to me wouldn't be a deal breaker one way or another. And I kind of get the sense that everybody would approve eliminating the rent going forward. So if that were the case, and you start adding another $3,000 to sewer reserves, that is going to help you with future projects. Just another way of looking at it too.
Okay, the motion has been withdrawn. Anything else, Rachel?
No, that's it. The system's working great.
Safety Committee, Michael, you still with us?
I am, yeah. I have a commitment to getting through the safety update in 10 minutes.
The clock is starting.
I'm going to cover three things. 2020 planning, which includes personnel, speed signage, and dog safety. The committee met this week, and we have, at this point, each year, we begin to look at a bunch of issues going into the season. And they are, first and foremost, around personnel planning, both for police and lifeguards. I'll talk about these in a minute. The lifeguards, we've done the outreach, waiting to hear from Evan and Mackenzie about whether they can, are going to come back. We think Evan is, and Mackenzie has said she doesn't know yet about her employment status. It's something that we're working on. We're going to touch on that. We don't know. We feel that we're a bit premature around, if we don't have answers yet, but we're premature on recruiting if we do need to recruit. The folks who have experience with this on the committee from prior years have it in hand. So more to come on that. Police, as you know, we split one position between two men. That's this past summer. Michael Boucher and Ben Colton. Total 40 hours on average a week. Most of that is 40 hours, most of that. Most of the bulk season is 40 hours, and then we have the ramp up at the beginning of the season and the ramp down. That's how we think about it. There's a hitch developed with Ben. He's taken a full-time position in Dexter. We start there. We don't know yet whether Ben can commit to the 16 to 20 hours a week that, on average he would work. Michael met with him this week after the committee met, just the timing of it. And the update from Michael isn't clear. I have a number of questions around it. It looks like there's a question about whether Ben's shifts are changing, the duration of hours, where he is now. So we don't know yet. So the option, there's a couple options that we'll explore if in fact Ben can't come back or can only come back on a limited basis. One option, obviously, is that Ben comes back, and then we have in place what we had last year. Another option is to look at if Ben can give us some number of hours, do we then recruit for a third person? And I recognize that there's costs associated with that in terms of payroll, but there's been some changes over in Belfast in the way that Belfast manages overtime, et cetera. So there are some big personnel over there that Michael knows of that may be looking for extra work, especially this summer. So there's always that. So that would be a part Ben, part another person combo. The third option, of course, is that if Ben has very little that he can give or none, we'll obviously do without Ben, regrettably, because we all love Ben. But it may turn out that Ben can't give us what we need in terms of hours, then we make the choice to go in another direction. We're not there yet. We don't know yet. We should know shortly or soon, so we have a chance to reach out and recruit them. So that's the personnel part. I'm going to pause to see if there's any discussion, comments, questions.
None?
No.
Okay, I'll continue then. Oh, all right. Okay. Was there a comment?
No, keep going, Michael.
Okay, yeah. All right, so I'm talking about speed signage. I'm going to ask Lisa to speak in a minute. As you recall, the board approved $4,000 in our last meeting, or whenever that was. I believe it was the last one, so long ago. 4,000, and we were going to work within that. We also have the generosity of a couple of donations to go towards the signage, and so now we have purchased two permanent signs, and Lisa and Bill can speak to that. And we're going to add those two to the one that we move around, so we'll have now three. And there's a little money left over, but we may look at getting a fourth with the help of some money that we raised in the community. Lisa, do you want to add?
I don't think so. The two that we purchased, the guy gave us a sale price. And with the donations, so we were able to get 2 for under the 4,000, along with donations by various people. They're permanent, so we're working as a committee to figure out the best placement for those. They'll be permanent and they're solar, so you don't have to worry about charging them, which seems to have been an issue last summer. We still have approximately, 500, 550 left in donations that have been promised that the committee will have to decide if they want to go ahead and fundraise for additional money, possibly to get maybe one more mobile one that could go up by bluff and be moved around, maybe towards Kelly's Cove or wherever, to cover different areas that people are concerned about. So we'll see what the committee decides.
And what are the proposed 3 locations of the 3 signs?
Well, so we still have the one that's movable, that was kind of down there by Broadway and Ruggles, right? So that's movable, we kind of figured that one stays down there. And we have the 2 more that maybe could be placed like on George Roads when you're coming in, right into the village. Oh, you guys know the houses better than me. Like over by Jenica's, but a little bit before there, right? And then somewhere along here, like we talked about, right in here being a proposed area when you come down the hill and you're really coming to more foot traffic. Billy had brought up, should it be further down by Kelly's Road? I don't know. And then, of course, Jim Coughlin has brought up a lot of concerns up there about Bluff Road by the golf course that people are speeding through there. So it's a conversation with the committee that people are supposed to be considering coming back and talking further about.
Thank you.
Yeah, the committee's going to come back with recommendations. Bill, do you have comments?
No, sounds like you're doing a good job.
Hey, Michael, it's Steve. I just have a question on the money. You're talking about pledges from community members, not cash that you guys are holding somewhere, correct?
Pledges, well, I think we have an anonymous donation already been received.
I guess the question is, does the village corporation possess the funds, or are the funds somewhere else?
For the remaining signs?
Well, I think we're talking about the 4,000 that was already approved, correct?
No, you said something that I understood to be that there were some additional funds and you were exploring the opportunity to buy yet another sign.
Yeah. And Lisa, can you speak to this? We bought 2 signs at X, and we have a little left over. If you add in what the board approved plus what we have for donation.
The remaining donation, the remaining donations from both Steve and I that we had pledged to the second sign, we had 500 to 550 remaining, which obviously doesn't pay for a last sign. So the question then is, are we going to fundraise? Is that what you're asking?
Well, the question is, I just want to know where the money is.
Where's the
And
account?
Where's the account?
The money is.
Who's
what we-
holding the donations?
No, so the answer is pretty straightforward. We have some money here. That money is going to flow to reserves at the present time, and we have pledges, and there's no money involved yet. That's wonderful. What I want to avoid is something that's happened in the past where one of the committees was holding cash, which they can't do.
No.
And I was just,
Because-
I wanted clarity.
Right, because,
We're not holding any cash.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill?
All I was going to say is I processed through the anonymous donation for X amount of dollars. You should have already had that by now. I processed, yes, I think it was 500.
That's the 500, Bill.
I think
I
I gave you a
processed-
check for 125, but if you want the remainder of the 300, I will give you a check. Is that what you're asking? Keep
The
it.
process is hers.
Okay,
Or,
yep.
Got it.
Yeah.
that should be coming through to you.
Keep going, Michael.
That was it. That's all I sent to you.
I'm good.
Yeah, no, I only paid that amount until we know what we're doing next.
That's speed signage. Third issue?
Okay, so are we clear on the fundraising? I heard a lot of dialogue.
Yes, thank you.
Good, right? Yeah. Okay, and then the last is Doc before. I'm sorry?
That was just me blowing my nose.
Someone blowing their nose. Keep going. Dock safety.
Sorry.
Yes, just one of these systems where when you're talking and there's noise, it sounds like it doesn't differentiate what you have to do. Dock safety, we are, the committee, we want to put a sign on the dock this year around dock safety rules and protocols and that sort of thing. So we're to a committee for approval. The committee will finalize it, we'll have it to the overseers for a last look-see, and then Bill's going to get a sign made, and the sign will be something that goes up and down, so to not have it suffer the ins and outs of winter. That's the dog safety piece. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, this is John. When you say that the sign will go up and down, is that daily? Is that seasonal? Seasonal. It's going up once and it's coming down in September.
Yeah.
Just to save it for the
That's
winter
right.
weather.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Steve, and I have my usual question or comment about, we have very little wiggle room in our budgets. So I assume that you're planning on buying this sign with currently budgeted safety-related funds.
That's the assumption. And Bill, I think we determined that the money's there, but we didn't have a sign line item, but we were running light in a couple line items that we were going to take it from. Bill.
I think so. I think that's the way you were talking, yes.
Yeah, and that would work just fine. I'm just, a cautionary comment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Over in safety, we're very super conscious of not exceeding by a
Very good, great. Bill?
Really grateful for such an increase last year.
Bill?
One of the things that Steve said about contingency or something is, the only thing that we haven't planned on yet, and we don't know, which I already told Safety Committee, is we don't know what it's going to cost to mount these permanent signs and have them put up. So we don't know what that cost is yet. So that's going to be
You're
a
talking
cost.
about the speed
signs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would have enough money in your budget that you have for this year to cover that. I'm just,
Does it have to be hardwired?
well, they got to go on a permanent post.
Well, we included a bracket in, right, so
Right.
you're talking about a
I just
post.
got to know
You
what
need
type
two
of post
posts,
and who's going to
and you
dig
need
the
some
hole.
cement to put it in the
and
ground.
cement
Yeah.
and all
Are they
that.
battery powered or hardwired?
No, they're hardwired, they're solar powered.
Solar power.
Okay,
Oh, solar, okay.
Seems
So,
like
So there's an extra cost there for those two, that's all I'm just.
There is a cost. There's that 500 sitting around
money
somewhere.
over.
right, if you don't have it and it
Is
costs,
there any
$40
Yeah, we have
for
some
two
money there.
posts, then you can take,
I'm sure
I'll write
infrastructure
you a check
is
for
free, but
$40.
this could be.
Ryan will dig the
I'll
hole.
give it
Well,
to Steve.
If we attach it to a tree, can it come out of the tree budget?
I could have taken it out of the road budget, but the problem is
You don't
we've
have to
already
plant
taken it out
another
of the road
tree.
budget.
Right, and there's no wiring.
We're not taking anything else out.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 11:45 and we're still in committee reports. I'm just letting you know, okay?
Yeah.
Anything else, Michael?
No, that's it, and I think I touched the same hopefully.
You
Thank
did.
you, Mike.
Thank you.
It's 10:15.
You did good.
Waterfront Safety Committee, Mr. Will.
No report.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Waited for this.
Town of Northport issues, Vicki, anything?
No, I haven't got to too many meetings. They are, apparently that, you know where the out of hand place used to be? That was the young guys, they call them the kids, I learned recently. That's where they're building the grow house, that big, there's a big concept thing they're putting up there. Oh, you people? Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. That's all I know about what's going on in Northport. I do want to add a little bit to the Nordic Aqua Farm piece that says that Michael's presentation, the 9 pages or whatever it is really good reading. And again, Upstream Watch is not against aqua farms, and they're not non-capitalistic, and they are not vegan and all those other things. It is that you've got to, once the horse is out of the barn, you're pretty much screwed. And there is no monitoring as far as what's happening. And this is a huge, huge thing. We just found out with the DEP, hearings are starting February 11th, that the DEP board advised that we have an attorney also with Dave Losi as an attorney, but not licensed at this time in the state of Maine. So that's an enormous amount of fees. Upstream Watch is not rich. We are no matter what you read in the paper, that guy who was part of that band over in Lincolnville, Fish or something, did not give us $60,000 or $70,000. I want that on the record, as they published in the Republican Journal. So it is a grassroots organization that is doing the best we can with limited funds, and I am just incredibly impressed with the incredible amount of knowledge and smart people. And we are doing this on behalf, with the Village Corp. So you need to know this, and thank you for joining us.
And one more little thing to add to that, my letter, I'm going on the 14th is the next meeting for the selectmen, and John also from the extreme schedule. I'm going to read them the highlights just like I did here, so that they understand where this is coming from.
From the town of Northport Select?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the town of Northport is really out of it. I mean, they're basically thinking it's a Bayside issue when they do this. So I find that extremely interesting. Anyway, okay, enough said, but if you've got a few extra dollars, then thank you very much.
I forwarded to all of you the fourth procedural order, which reacted to Nordic Aqua Farms' motions to strike the various elements of the expertise and witness statements. Having read that myself, my observation was that it was buttressed specifically Mike's comment early today that the Nordic has decided to stop wanting information that is pertinent to this discussion, to move to strike expertise on issues that are specifically relevant is a sad approach, but they seem to be making headway in their application before the board.
Report of the President, I received, actually...
Vicki, I had one sheet. Vicki, we might need some of your help on the town liaison around placement of, if the recommendation is to place some of these signs on town roads, we might need to.
Sure.
Obviously, working with Bill, get that.
Just let me know.
Yeah, sorry, John.
That's all right. I'm just writing it down. Bill received a request from Peg Woolley to install a memorial bench in honor of her parents. I think we have a bench, I don't want to say committee yet.
We have we took on the memorial piece. We don't have a protocol or anything like that, but I'd be more than happy to take that off of your and find out the particulars and bring that back to you, okay?
Thank you. You don't need to bring it back to me. I think it's sufficient to go to the board. Yes.
At one time, we had established a moratorium on benches until we decided how they were going to be paid for.
That's an appropriate response, but
Well, that's what I went to the tree
Is
committee,
that
because
what
we're
it
thinking about encouraging
Is
people.
that
We
what
have to find out, we
Yeah.
have to find wooden benches because of the upkeep. We have to find out what she wants.
Yeah.
What she wants to do first.
Right, but we have a moratorium.
Not on benches as a whole.
I believe we had talked about holding on benches and trying to see if we could migrate to trees.
Oh, okay.
Because we have so many benches around, and just, at some point, we
It
can't
was,
provide a bench for everybody who's out there.
Encourage her to plant a tree.
Although we will have space in the new seawall in front of the rocks for benches, so.
and my understanding, it wasn't benches, it came up because of the disrepair of the wooden benches. If she wants to put in a granite bench or something like that, that is fine. It's, again, low maintenance, because we are finding ourselves responsible for all this maintenance, okay?
Yeah, okay, great.
So you talk to Peggy.
I'll talk to her.
thank you. Report of the village agent, Mr. Page.
You guys gonna be good for an hour or two? Okay.
I resign.
Wait, Mike did his in 10 minutes, how about you?
What's that?
Go ahead.
No. Just one issue, maybe two here. As you know, when the Parslows lifted their house and put a foundation under it on Main Street this last summer, the issue came to me is where when these places go up, where do they put their perimeter drain that goes around the bottom of the foundation to drain out? They came to me and I says, well, you know, you're gonna put this drain in, where are you gonna put it? You can't run it off onto your neighbor. Well, we don't know, you know. I says, well, you know, it needs to go into the storm drain system, but I says, the problem is, you need to go to the overseers and ask permission to do that, because it's under their hot top road. Well, you'll hear all kinds of different stories and rumors going on, but that's where it ended, and then it was said they were gonna dig a hole, fill it full of crushed rock at the edge of the hot top, and let the pipe stop there, and then it would disperse into the ground. Well, that is not happening. It had run all summer. I'm surprised that your sister has not complained about her walkway
She's a
being
loving,
soaked.
kind person who never complains.
But the issue is right now, and this
This
is
is
the
my
issue
That's on record.
the
This
issue
is my
that
sister
I told them is, in the wintertime, that is gonna be a hazard because it's gonna run out in the road and it's gonna be icy. And I've had 4 people who walk on Main Street complain that they couldn't walk up Main Street because it was ice all the way across. It was too slippery.
Next to-
So, I guess I have contacted the contractor at the time and told him about that, so we can come back and visit that issue. So, do I still tell them that they have to come here and ask permission to open the road up to put that drain into the catch basin? Okay.
So, that just,
So,
go ahead.
part of that is, okay, now this is not an unusual circumstance. It
Yeah.
happens quite a lot around the village. There are other situations, the same way, people doing the same thing on the same property. Does anybody know whether that isn't addressed in their permit, what they do with their perimeter drain? So this is gonna be every case, we're gonna have to kind of figure this out.
Then as we don't know that, it's not addressed in the permit they get from the town.
Right.
Yeah.
The building inspection,
Well,
well, you've done building, you didn't have to address it when you just did your house.
It's connected to the, it was connected, went out into the ditch.
No, I don't mean that you had the issue, but you didn't have to, your box didn't say, and what are you doing about perimeter drains? The building inspection code, or whatever they call it,
No,
or building
my
inspection
point
doesn't
was,
require that.
when it went out, it was gonna go into the ditch, and then the road was being redone, so all those things were connected at the time. The issue here is Main Street exists already. So, do we need to, make a motion or something that everybody has to pay to connect those two? If they have a paved road, the only thing to do with it is to connect it to the sewer. I mean, the storm drain. You know what I meant. I'm sorry.
The only
It's been a long
issue
meeting.
is, you know,
Because that's really
the
what.
town has a moratorium when they pave a road of 5 years.
Yep,
We didn't do anything on our road, so is it okay to dig that, give them permission?
as long
to
as
dig
they
that
pay
road
for
up?
it, as long as they pay for
Okay,
it.
but-
They have to come to
But
us
they
and
have
ask
to
permission.
come here
Right.
first, that's what I'm asking.
Right,
And then fix it.
right, they have to.
They have to pay all the costs.
They have to come for permission, they have to outline what their expense, how they intend to pay for it.
Okay.
In the same way that they want to store their house on our property when they're lifting it and putting their foundations under it.
So the problem is that this is not something that's reviewed by TUPE,
Right,
right? Because the TUPE's review ends at the property line,
right,
and then we own that road.
right.
So we need to have a procedure or right?
Because see, what happens is they come to me and they say, well, you know, I need to get this.
So
drain, where
I
am
would
gonna
like to
put
make
it?
a motion that if people are adding a foundation and/or perimeter drain to their house, and they live on a blacktop road with a existing storm drain, that they have to connect to that storm drain, and they have to pay the expenses to take it from their house to connect it to the storm drain, and the fees for Billy to observe it.
Mike, surely there is a quicker, shorter, cleaner way to make a motion than all that. I promise you there must be.
Okay, someone else, that's what I wanted to say.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm just saying that it's exactly what, I think that the issue, it seems to me, is that people won't necessarily come here. Billy may say you have to come here, and then they just ignore it. And that's the case, now you have now you have ice on Main Street because of that.
Okay.
So it's the requirement to address the overseers regarding exterior connections on your pipes or something.
They do have to come here, because they have to come here for the water and sewer, because whenever you do any of that work, you're already adjusting the water and sewer. But stormwater is not in either one of those, so this would be a
In
separate.
either of those ordinances, and that's, so,
Jeffrey?
Well, so, one thing, can we go to the town, to Tupi, and ask them to adjust the permitting form that simply adds, it gets people to understand that this is an issue. So as you're figuring out the permitting or figuring out your project, remember you have to deal with stormwater runoff.
yeah.
Does it make sense to try to capture that early in the process? And then we still, to your point, I think you do have to say, and if you're on paved road, you have to pay to do it, but.
Go ahead.
Can it be, should it be part of our zoning ordinance?
That's what I'm puzzling through, is it should be part of, is it part of the zoning? Is it part of the building inspection code, which is what Tupi has? Or is it part of the utilities sign-in? Each of them requires an ordinance in order to ask the person the question. A motion is a very nice idea, but I'm not sure it gets you where you want to be. I think we have to look at the utilities, sewer connection and water connection pieces, see if that might, for instance, we talk about no gutters or some of those sump pumps.
Right, they
So
can't tell you.
maybe we can say, oh, it's already covered. Or when we look at the building inspection code, that is, I know that's not the right word, it's the thing that the Tupi's building permit, as opposed to our zoning. We have to look at our zoning. That's what I think.
This is happening amongst committees,
Yeah.
the governance, Tanzil zoning and infrastructure and the utilities department. But it feels like some sort of recommendation should come back.
Yeah, I think that we should have a report of that.
I mean, these people have to come here.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
an
They have a
immediate
problem.
issue.
And
Yeah,
then
they've
we
been
need to,
told.
we need to shore up our requirements and figure out how to do that.
Right.
Wasn't there something earlier where we wanted Tupi to do? I'm starting to think maybe Tupi should hand out the permit form and the town of Northport form that goes with it.
No, what I was talking about with Tupi was, she controls all the buildings over
Is there, so how are we going to move forward on
Well, I
this?
think we'll look at it and make a report back in February, but in the meantime, with the Barstow family having been advised by the village agent what to do with water runoff, they now need to be reminded that they have to do it. When you,
So do I
When you
contact her or do I contact the contractor?
it's the owner's responsibility. Yeah,
Okay,
you
sorry.
can, and then you can bring in your own political sense as to
Right.
who will get to understand the need for resolution faster.
And it's perfectly fine to say that this issue is brought up with the overseers and that's, it's now, it's a little bit more weight hanging
Right.
on.
And you need a paper trail, so you need to do it in writing.
Well, that's why I brought it up.
And who's going to report back here and how next?
Well,
month?
I'll look at, the governance committee will look it over, and
and
I
come over to
haven't read the town building permit ordinance in a million
Yeah, but
years.
the problem with that is it ends at the lot, their jurisdiction, so it's really on us, I think.
Okay,
Because basically you're running your water onto somebody else's property.
exactly.
And that's what they've done.
All right, what else, Bill?
Did you say that standard practice doesn't make sense?
That's it, I think.
Really?
Good,
Thank you.
let's move on.
Thank you. Report of the office manager. That's right now.
That'd be me.
Yeah,
No report.
Comments by meeting attendees and agenda. Is there anyone here who'd like to address something? from the-
I'm sorry, where are we with, is Amy still with us? And are we-
She's doing utilities, what I would call healthy.
So we're, okay, you're feeling good about all this.
look at what Amy did for the utilities committee, we hadn't had one for, we had a utility billing recap, we hadn't had one for 9 months, we finally got one.
And just so you know, Judy was just as excited the other day.
It's a simple thing.
Sorry, Ned or
Oh,
Amy?
yeah, well, it was just a sort of a follow-up to the whole bench thing and not wanting to have more wooden benches. And as you may recall, the Lightner the bench that we built around in Muggles Park, which is all wood, is in desperate need of repair. I was going to take care of it in the spring, get through the winter, but do you want me to repair it with wood?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Because that's what it was,
That's right.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
good.
It lasted a long time.
No
so-
change.
Yeah, no, I just was gonna go with the same.
Especially that one.
And I just want to clarify that for the families that have these benches that want to maintain them, that's wonderful. You do, yeah.
Yeah. It's the benches where it was donated by somebody and then there's nobody here to pay for it.
Right, I totally get it. I
If you'd
just
like to-
overheard you say, let's discontinue wooden benches, and said, well, before I get my siblings to kick in, let's make sure.
If they'd like to kick in for granite, you can do that.
No.
Guys, quiet, Lisa.
I have on my calendar that someone just needs to tell me what to start for the 2020 annual report.
You and I are going to talk about that.
Perfect. That's all I need.
I
to
don't
know.
start scaring these guys about it until February.
Okay, great. And if we talk about next time,
That's
that's fine too. Okay, I just
It comes together at
make
the
sure
beginning
I'm
of
trying to
like.
cover myself. Great, perfect.
Before we go into executive session?
Yes, so next thing is going to be executive session, which Judy has a.
I have a question on the warrants. There is a $600 retainage payment to Stevens Electric, but there was also an email saying that we already paid it and they're sending it back. So could you answer that for me?
I cannot. I can tell you that I'm aware of it, I can tell you that I need to research it. The issue at hand is that Dick sent me a note asking me to please pay the retainage, so we processed it for payment. We have previously processed an invoice asking the accounting firm to reduce the payment by $600. It appears that they paid it in full, but I've not had time to research it.
So can we pull that check out on this?
I'm doing that. Yep.
Okay, so we'll sign it, but we'll pull that one out.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else before we move into executive session, which will
One
not?
of those little bumps I talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's okay.
Anything else?
Hold on.
Then I declare this portion of the meeting over at 12:05.